Hey, everybody, welcome back to Final Resonance TV and episode number 45 of Van Halen Stories. Today, my guest is the amazing guitar technician for Joe Bonamassa for almost a decade, right? That's about right. Played with the band Venom and Carcass, worked with Daryl Hall and John Oates as well. A big Van Halen fan, I know, because I just watched I've been watching your Instagram for years, so I know you're way into Van Halen, vintage Charvels and all kinds of guitars, stuff that you go out on the famous guitar safaris with Joe Bonamassa and collect. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. But thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, very cool. I'm excited to do this for sure.
Cool, man. Well, let's start out with, one of the things I want to ask you about is you have that blue and white Charvel behind you. That one. And I saw on your Instagram, you said it had a really cool story, but you didn't elaborate on the story. Will you tell the story?
Yeah, the story, if I wrote it on Instagram, no one's going to read 26 paragraphs.
Right.
And it's a well-known guitar in the collecting of Charvel world.
Okay.
So in 1982, my best buddy in high school ordered this guitar to his specs. And part of the deal for the local shop to be able to sell Charvels was they needed to order 3. So he ordered this. The owner of the store ordered like a Sunburst Strat with a Floyd. And I ordered a Candy Apple Red Pointy, which I'll elaborate on why it's pointy and not Strat head.
Okay.
So my friend Sean Patterson, I think his Instagram is Sean Patterson Music. He's a composer for movies and soundtracks and things. And so he ordered this guitar, and it was like we'd only seen one Floyd Rose at this point. So I had bought a used Floyd with no logos off, out of the newspaper, and, stuck it in this Strat thing that, of course, we striped it. And, I just took a drill. I don't know what I'm doing. And so we'd only ever seen this one Floyd. And so Sean gets this guitar. It's got the Fernandez era Floyd. Okay. And so he covets this guitar. He won't let anyone play it, even me. He locks it up with a chain, it's crazy. And so a few years go by. I'm living in Hollywood at this point, and he moves to Hollywood, and he's going to the Dick Grove School, and he needs money. Oh. So I buy the guitar off him, and I'm paying him like $50 a week because I don't have any money. I'm just a Hollywood bum trying to get in a band. And so I buy the guitar, but I immediately go, well, I can't go in public and play a striped guitar.
Right.
So I promptly go to these strippers, and we pull out the nail polish and we drip it all over the guitar. So it's like we're turning it upside down. It's dripping. It's all different colors. One of the girls signs her name. And by this time, he'd already added a neck pickup, a switch, and a tone control.
Okay. So
then I decide I'm going to take it with me. I'm about to join Venom. So this is 86. And I'm going to take this guitar with me. And so I roll over there. We end up scalloping it.
Right.
Of course, by then it has a fine tuner Floyd, and we've cut it out to pull up because of the Attitude song, all that typical shit. And right. It's why you don't see any Charvels very often that aren't modded, which is so stupid since it was like a custom ordered guitar to begin with.
Right.
So I use the guitar for a few years, and then I move on to Ibanez, and this kind of just lays around. And then when, I get this bright idea, I'm going to strip it to the wood. So I strip it. It's swamp ash. It's beautifully matched grain. And by that point, we had carved out the cutaway here.
Okay.
And like Steve Vai,
Right.
And then it just kind of sat there and didn't do anything for a while. So another Charvel guy local to me that we call Metal Cop, who was big on the Charvel forums and stuff, he buys it off me and sends it to GMW in California.
Okay.
And gets it restored. So they match the paint to this little scrap of paint in the back of the cavity. I've got one picture of my friend Sean playing it, and it kind of obscures some of the stripes. But so basically, they put a new board on it. They cap the body. They fill the holes. They cap the body, and then try to get it as close to original as possible. And then Metal Cop shows up in the local shop with it to show me, and I'm like, I want it back. So I believe the deal was I bought him a Les Paul custom in the shop, and maybe a Line 6 amp. I'll have to ask him. But so I've just kept the guitar for years. I don't really use it for a lot.
Right.
It's quirky to tune. I've got it down pretty well. The key to tuning a non-tuning Floyd is to have your string bar low.
Okay.
So that there's no movement of the string when you clamp, and to clamp it lightly. You can't wrench on this shit.
Right.
And but it still has the original pickup and the original plate, and it's serial number 1505. And it supposedly, as far as all us goons figured out years ago, it could be the first factory mounted Floyd from Charbel.
Okay.
Because at the time it was brass bridges, and we were just about to see the influx of the Kaler probably a few months later, because of, Kramer getting the exclusive rights to the Floyd via their connection with Schaller and all that stuff. So
that's 86, right? 86. Yeah,
that's about 86, 85, 86. Yeah, I'm trying to think when I got my first fine tuner Floyd, and we all were crazy. We were like, I got to have that. Eddie's got that, right?
Right.
So, and so I just, I use it to record sometimes. I used it on a Venom record a few, a billion years ago, it seems now. And I toured with it a little, but now it's just kind of here. It's more like just a fun piece. And, it's part of the history of the brand.
Right.
And,
right.
And I love having them.
Does it still got a scallop board or not?
No, they put a new board on it.
Right. Okay. So it's a flat board. I got you.
Yeah. So, so basically we're dealing with the neck wood, and the body wood is original.
Right.
And the pickup. And then, it's interesting too, because, obviously with me doing a lot of vintage guitar stuff, we want that stuff all original.
Right.
We don't want to repaint a Strat. Right. And,
right.
But in this case, I look at it more like an old car. If you restore a Mustang, it can make the value go better.
Right.
Of course. And how many Mustangs from the 60s are all original at this point, right?
Right. Sure.
So it's kind of like a car restoration, or if you were going to say it was fine art and we restored the painting.
Right. Right.
So,
right. I remember I asked Brad Gillis about the original Floyd, because I had met him one time and I was like, how do you keep it in tune? So I guess you answered my question.
That's part of it. I mean, his is floating. This thing's on the deck. This ain't going anywhere.
Right.
And I've grown out of the floating Floyd.
Right.
I don't want to pull up harmonics anymore or anything.
Right.
I want people to want me to actually play with them, not go, oh, not that again, So
right. Another one you got that I saw was really cool was this Brian Adams black, what do you call it? Black Demon.
That's up in the Git storage. That I got that guitar in probably, I want to say 2003, and I got in touch with Keith Scott,
right,
who's the actual owner, and I thought it was Brian's guitar, and so I was friends with Mickey Curry, the drummer, and because of my Hall & Oates connection, so I called him up and I said, I want to buy that guitar, and he's like, that's not Brian's guitar, that's Keith's. So I'm like, well, give him my number or give me his, whatever. So we start talking a little. We strike up a friendship. We both love Van Halen. We both love Holdsworth. So I'm like, dude, sell me that black thing. Come on. And he's like, I haven't even opened the case in 10 years or whatever. It's in storage. And I'm like, well, whenever. I'm your guy, So I made him an offer, and I said, I'm not paying extra for the celebrity thing because, like, you're not known for your wiggle stick, And so we finally did a deal like 18 months later.
Wow.
And I used that on the road with Venom. I used it to record a lot of stuff. I just took it on the road last year with Venom Incorporated, the spinoff. And I used it. It kind of needs fretwork now. And but it's a great guitar. And the guitar originally had a standard DiMarzio trem, which has Gibson spacing.
Okay.
And a pick guard. And so, of course, they got all hot and bothered about the Floyd Rose too. So they put it in, and it cracked because of the basswood body.
Mm-hmm.
So Keith sent it back to Grover, and they just put a new body and put the neck on it. And it says Keith Scott in the neck pocket. Mm-hmm. And now it's hum single, and it was two hum. Right. But the whole thing, like the back of the neck is black.
Right.
Ebony board. So we call it the Black Demon.
Right.
And that's the name Keith gave it.
Wow. That's pretty cool that, being in that video too. I wonder why Brian chose to play that in the video, because that's not his normal deal.
Yeah. I mean, at the time he was playing that guitar a lot.
Okay.
I don't know if it was because of the tuning stability of the Floyd.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he wasn't going out there ripping crazy solos. That's Keith's job.
Right.
And Keith is a overlooked genius guitar player. Aside from his melodic, perfect pop solos, he's got like chops beyond belief. And I mean, I've FaceTime with him, and he's like, on a 335 ripping kind of Holdsworth style stuff, McLaughlin style stuff, and great guy. And, of course, I can go see Bryan Adams anytime, right?
Right. And that's one of the things Eddie Van Halen did towards the end of his life. He actually went and saw Bryan Adams, hung out with Keith Scott and Bryan Adams, and that was that little video put out. Yeah. Yeah,
and Rudy was the guitar tech on that tour.
Right.
And I've kind of asked Keith sideways if, can you connect me with Rudy so I can ask him stuff? And he's like, I don't think he wants to talk about it, or, because he's pretty quiet, right?
Right. No. Yeah. It's almost impossible to get. I mean, I know people that know him, but it's, that's one of my going down that road for a while trying to get him. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it'd be better maybe if he was on your show than just talk to me on the phone.
Oh, right? It'd be awesome to have some sort of documentation on video, because there is one interview, and there's only one long interview that was done with him. I think Steve Rosen did that interview, and it's out there in print on the Van Halen links. You can find it, but it's, it's the early days stuff, all the stuff when Eddie was first coming up, and that's something.
Right, and it's vague, right?
Yeah. And you know what? Do you have one of those black and yellow lawsuit?
I do. I have it right here.
There it is. All right, man.
Yes. This one's a mutt, I think.
Okay.
I think the neck is off something else, as I recall. Okay. But and I didn't do all this. That was already played to hell when it showed up.
Wow, amazing.
So this guy came to a Bonamassa gig, and he brought a few guitars, and he brought this to show me.
Yeah. And
I had spent my allotment at the time on that tour of buying all kinds of dumb shit. And so, Joe goes off stage, and I'm like standing there like conjuring, like, what can I do? How can I, like I'm dying. Right. And so Joe texts me, and he's like, what's the real street value of that? And I tell him what I think it's worth. And so he comes straight out onto the stage 2 minutes later, and he makes an offer, and finally the guy accepts. He writes him a check, and, we're in the hotel that night after the show, and he's ripping on it. He used it for the gig too.
Wow.
And then he realized like this isn't for him, right? So, you know, one hum and no dynamics, you know.
Right.
So basically we're sitting there having a couple of wines, and I'm like, well, dude, you know, if you want to get rid of that, I'll buy it off you. He's like, well, you know, it's good to have, you know, good to have a Charvel in the lineup. And I'm like, you bastard, you know. So cut to several months later around Christmas. I was living above a guitar shop, and they're like, hey man, a box just came for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go down to the store, and there's a guitar box. And as soon as I saw the handwriting on the label, I was like, no way. Because I knew what was in there. Oh, and wow. It was, you know, there's a little gift card in there. And it's like, you know, this belongs in your collection. So Joe gave it to me as a gift, which, you know. Cool. And I mean, you know, that's really the thing is, and you not just people like him, but a lot of guys who are touring, and, you know, it's not uncommon to be like, oh, hey, man, I got this guitar that you like, you can have it, you know? Yeah. And so this had a brass bridge on it. Yeah. And I was chewing the fat with George Trips and James Santiago one day at rehearsal. And George had this old Floyd. And I said, hey man, sell me that Floyd. He's like, no, I'm gonna build a guitar. And I'm like, you've got like 60 guitars, you know? And I said, I'll give you all the money in my pocket for it. And he goes, well, knowing you, he's like, you know, knowing you, that's $30, right? and everybody's, you know, we're all busting him. And he finally goes, all right, what do you got? And I'm like, well, 175 in cash. So he sold me the bridge, which is an early, there's no writing on it. Right. It's crude. So I modded this, and, you know, I got an old nut for it, and I tuned it this morning. Yeah. And it's doing good. Yeah. And once these are in tune, as Brad Gillis will tell you, they're pretty solid. Right. At that point. And of course, you know, I'm so lazy. My bar's like Eddie's. It's just floppy. It takes a week and a half to get it to engage, you know. That's wild, man. That's cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. I don't really use it for much. I keep it in E flat. It's, you know, once you get 50, 60 guitars, all of a sudden, some of them just become, you know, just they're part of the artwork around the house. You know? Right. I know. I rotate stuff a lot. Yeah. And I've started slimming down a little bit because it's just stupid, the amount of stuff I have. And and every guitar I sell keeps me from working a regular job one more day. So, yeah. Right. That's amazing. You know what? I actually found one of these things in my hometown by accident. I went to pick up a bunch of road cases somebody was giving to me. He goes, let me show you something. We went back in this room, and he whips out one of these lawsuit black and yellows. And I'm like, what the weird thing was, like, maybe like that one, the neck was different. It was a pointy, which was strange to me. But I took the photo to Grover. I showed it to him, and Grover wanted to buy it. He wanted to buy it back. So I don't know what he knew that I didn't know, but. Well, I think the thing with the pointy ones, you know, because even after Eddie got pissed, they were slipping this stuff out. Sure. You know, I mean, I mean, it literally on the work order for the blue and white one, it says Van Halen stripes. Okay. Or VH stripes. I haven't looked at it in a while, but they used to do a work order with all these categories. You know, what color hardware, what type of tuners, what wood, you know, how many pickups, width of the neck. But they also kept 3x5 file cards on every guitar. Okay. So it would have the dealer name, the person who's buying it, if it's custom ordered through the dealer, and some other features written on it. And so a long time ago, you used to be able to get in touch with Jackson, and they would give you a copy of your work order. Okay. And as far as I know now, that stuff's locked up in a warehouse in Arizona somewhere. And, you know, it's a shame because they should just digitize that stuff and put it online, and you know, or make a, you know, okay, I own the guitar, charge me $25, whatever, you know, you know, I'd take one for everyone that's here, you know.
Yeah. I'll try to find that photo. I took a picture of it that day while I was over there. I was like, that's why I was like, oh my God. Of course, he didn't want to sell it, but I was just intrigued that I found one in my backyard.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how many
Right.
striped ones there were, but there were different colors as well. Yeah. Obviously, my friend picked blue and white back then. And obviously the black and yellow was the one.
Sure.
You know, and I mean, you know, I was just seeing the video today with the Rick James guy. Yeah, he's playing one, and his has a striped headstock.
Yeah.
And Frankie Sullivan from Survivor, he's got a black and yellow.
Oh yeah, wow!
And he's still got it. I'm poking him like, break that out.
I opened up for him one night here in town, and he had a Dumble. I think his Dumble. He's got a Dumble with him that night.
Oh, he's got a bunch of Dumbles.
Yeah, he carried that with him, and so the tech showed me the Dumble. I was like, oh man, I didn't know he had a Dumble with him tonight. Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun. I played through a lot of Dumbles because of hanging around Joe.
Right.
You know, even if I was filthy, I couldn't. You know, I don't need to. I'd buy a burst, of course.
Right.
But for some reason, I think that's worth the money.
Right.
But it's because of my historian brain, you know.
Sure. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, since we've been on your thing, I want to go back to when you were a kid, because you mentioned this in another interview that you made the same transition I made from Ace to Eddie, sort of thing, right? It seemed like all of us at that particular point, same age, we're Ace fans first, because just like you did when you were talking about this. I kind of found Kiss as like this thing that I couldn't be. But when Eddie Van Halen came around, I kind of identified finally with the idea of playing guitar in a way that I didn't do with Kiss. How did that whole thing go for you?
Well, obviously, just like a lot of people in this age bracket, the spectacle of Kiss was the initial like, whoa. And, you know, and then the marketing they had was just phenomenal.
Right,
you know,
right.
Lunchbox, you know, the dolls, the posters. I had all the posters, the giant posters. And so I liked Kiss. And of course, I liked a lot of stuff that my dad listened to, you know, Led Zeppelin and, you know, stuff like The Doors and Humble Pie, Jethro Tull. But Kiss was something that really, you know, like, this is mine.
Right.
And I remember getting like Destroyer and putting it on. My dad bought it and he's like, oh, this is terrible, you know, but he took me to the show in 1978 and he endured it. And he also took me to see them on the Dynasty tour as well.
Yeah.
So he didn't really like the music, but he tolerated it because he knew I was really interested, and I've been taking lessons. And you know, I just got my first electric guitar like a week before I went to see Kiss. It was some Tisco plywood junk, you know.
Right.
But it was, and I had a big muff. And so I had this rotten sound and this rotten guitar, but it was electric because, you know, of course, like a lot of parents back then, they were like, well, if you get good at an acoustic, then we'll, you know.
Sure.
And, you know, so the Kiss transition, of course, then I start getting records, right?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, we'll just pick like, I got a Foreigner record, I got a whatever. And my dad buys Van Halen 1 because he liked Running with the Devil. He heard it on the radio and he liked the little melody. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I got this record I think you want to hear. And he puts it on and I'm like, okay, that's mine. And, you know, this is a time when maybe you can get Cream magazine, you can get Circus. I might have just discovered Guitar Player. at that point. There was no such thing as Guitar World.
Right.
And so I start, I'm buying Circus magazine. I get a subscription to Guitar Player, and like I'm running to the mail truck,
Right.
and I'm reading everything about everybody, anybody, Larry Coryell, Al Di Meola. It doesn't matter, right? It's just like, this guy plays guitar. And so the Van Halen thing, what it starts is this whole thing of me and a couple friends. We're starting to hear the guitar.
Okay.
It's not just part of a like rock and roll all night, right? The guitar is jumping out at us. And then, then we finally see pictures of Eddie, and he's got this thing,
Right.
So then we want to spray paint shit,
Right.
And I mean, and then 79, my friend who's older gets in a car wreck, and he's going to Van Halen, and not on the way, but beforehand, and he gets a head injury. Ooh. So his parents won't let him go to the show. So I get the ticket.
Oh, wow.
And I go with the older dudes. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I'm 14, right. I'm a freshman.
Right.
And mind blown.
Right.
Then the game's over. Right.
Wow.
This is the best band in the world. I'm going to my guitar lesson. I'm telling my guitar teacher, like, they got the best singer. They got the best drummer. They got the best bass player. And Eddie's the king. And and every time I saw them, it was accidental.
Oh, really?
Like somebody had an extra ticket. And so, I went to that one, 79. He's playing the Bumblebee.
Right.
I can't remember if the Floyd was on it yet. It must have been.
Right.
Because it was like August. So I think it was.
Yeah.
And then the next time we went was Fair Warning.
Right.
At Boston Garden.
Wow. And
that was mind blowing, with all the speakers stacked everywhere.
Yeah.
And then we went to Diver Down. And then the last time I saw him was 84.
Right. Right.
And those were all like spare ticket. Hey, do you want to go? I got an extra ticket situations.
Wow.
So very fortunate. I've never saw them with Sammy. Mm-hmm. Not that I dislike it, but once he came on, I was moving into being a semi-pro guitarist at the time.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't interested in this poppy thing. Even though Van Halen is pop music all the way back to the first record.
Right.
There's a lot of pop in there. But I was getting into black metal, death metal, and trying to be brutal and whatever. So I kind of shied away from a lot of that. And even like bands I loved, like Pink Floyd and Zeppelin, I just wasn't interested at the time,
Yeah.
And of course it all comes full circle.
Yeah, I was going to say that same thing happened to me with when Sammy came in. I was more gravitating towards George Lynch at that period, because he was going with his new Lynch Mob. It was getting heavier and heavier, more harder stuff. Yngwie, of course, I was into Yngwie too. And so I was, like you said, when Sammy came in, it was sort of like a softer version of the band, and I was used to this heavy rock band, so I still listened and still went to shows, but I kind of went a different direction with it then. So yeah. That's
and I mean, the thing with the era with Sammy, which, they embraced this melody stuff, right? And they started writing even more songs that girls liked.
Right.
Because instead of, ain't talking about love,
when it's love.
yeah. But then it's like love walks in, and,
right.
How do I know when it's love, or, whatever. And so they become, pretty palatable to a lot of people.
Right.
And Eddie's tone becomes a bit smoother.
Right.
It's less abrasive. Yeah. The solos aren't necessarily as crazy. There's still plenty of crazy stuff going on, though.
Sure.
And of course, now that Ed's gone, I go back and I listen to all of it.
Hmm.
And, you know, there's stuff I like about every single record.
Hmm.
And there's a few songs I've just skipped.
Sure.
And, you know, I mean, like, I don't need to hear them play apolitical blues, right?
Right.
Like,
Right. Sure.
that's not their department.
Right.
I
Sure.
get it. They want to have fun,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Right.
But
I got you for sure.
but
Yeah. What were some of your favorite songs off, say, Van Halen 1?
well, of course, you know, On Fire, of course, is and um, Feel Your Love Tonight. You know, I'm the One. You know, the whole album's just
Right.
it's just banging. And you know, unlike a lot of people, I never learned Eruption.
Right. Right.
I couldn't get through it with a gun to my head. Of course, I know how to tap,
Right.
and it all came from that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But everybody else was ruining Eruption around me.
Okay.
So I can put it on today and still be mesmerized.
Right.
And I know what he's doing. I've seen everybody play it, right? I've seen him play it. And there's guys who are spectacular at sounding like Van Halen.
Right.
And I'm pretty spectacular at sounding equally rotten on all instruments as me, you know? It's like, I just kind of like, now I'm older, I've kind of lost a lot of the influences.
Right.
And they're there, but they're not as blatant. You know, like I went through I really, when Roth got Vi, I was obsessed with that record.
Yeah.
It was right when I joined Venom, and the other guitar player in Venom, he was obsessed with Vi. We were like trying to outdo each other and whammy this and harmonics to the sky. And, you know, and of course, listening back, which I never listen to that stuff these days, but it makes me go, oh, it's terrible. But for some people, they like it, and that's fine. You know,
right.
I played that stuff. I was a kid, you know, I didn't know how to make records. I didn't even, you know, I had a Marshall, but I didn't know if I was making a tone, you know.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I don't know what I know now, like anybody, you know.
Right.
I know how to make amps do what I want them to do.
Right. Yeah, and you got some great amps behind you. You got that, was it a BE100 and then the Metro one? And
the Metro Friedman, which is like Eddie's amp, right? Lay down transformer.
Tweaks, yep.
Everything on 10. The Marshall, which is the last of the before the Brown Eye.
Right.
In fact, when I ordered it, was the most I'd ever paid for any amp in my life. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Yeah. And then Dave got the cease and desist from Marshall. Mm-hmm. And I was like, so do I, you know, no offense, but do I get a Marshall badge? And he's like, I remember him writing to me saying, we'll just have to find out, won't we? So, and I really like that amp a lot. And I've never toured with it or anything. Yeah. It's mainly jamming or in the recordings and stuff. It's kind of sinewy. I'm sure you've played a Brown Eye.
Sure.
It's got a certain thing that it does really well. And I've got all the little switches in the back. I got every option that he offered at the time.
Right.
And, you know, and then, of course, behind me, I have the my OG 5150.
Right on. Okay.
That I bought in 93. And this is a nocturnal amulet. My friend makes those in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool amp too, EL34. And then I have a stock 50-watt Marshall over here. Yeah. And this is a JCM 800 that's modded by John Sear.
Okay, cool.
And it's a real fire breather. In fact, they scraped the letters off. It just says M80 now. And it's got a lot. It must be like an Aldrich mod or something. I don't know.
Right.
I guess I should ask Doug. Maybe he'd know, because John just remembered doing the mod.
Uh-huh.
As soon as I told him I got this amp, it's M80. He's like, "Oh yeah, I did that."
Okay. So yeah.
And you know, so and and what you can't see here is there's another 5150. There's a 100-watt Friedman Dirty Shirley, which is a prototype, which he made for Bonamassa. And it, not that it's not great, but for his amount, what he needs for headroom, it was too squishy. So it ended up here, semi-permanent, forever home.
Yeah. So you were talking about this in another video about his touch and the I guess it's the stiff, like you said, if it's too soft, it's got too much sag or whatever. It messes with his technique, I guess, like it would with me going the other way with a really stiff plexi or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, his rigs, I'm sure you've seen over the past few years, has really evolved in kind of in a circle. Like when I met him, he had a Jubilee, a Category 5, 2 Van Wieldens, and there was something else I don't even remember. It's never like he's not switching 6 amps all over. The Jubilee's on, and that's got the loop. So you've got the Boss Delay and the Rotosphere in there. And then that amp is on with every combination.
Okay.
And I can only guess at the rig that he's running right now. I went to see him last year, and he's back to the Jubilee situation, Tweed Twins, and there's 2 or 3 Dumbles. And I don't know how like the third Dumble is triggered or anything. But basically what you would end up with is Jubilee, Twins, Jubilee, and Dumbles. And all you're doing there is you're not getting like these massively different sounds. It's all about stacking the mid-range.
Okay.
And getting it to have this certain thickness. And it's easier to tell if you can stand there.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
And it's for a while we had just 4 Tweed Twins.
Right.
Then we had, or maybe we had 2 Bassmen and 2 Twins. Then we went to 4 Twins, and it had, a wah and a boost. And that was it.
Right.
And a TC chorus that split to the splitters. And that was, I think that was just like he grabbed the chorus because it had 2 outs when he was plugging shit in.
Right.
And, but the thing with that whole rig is it's high headroom.
Right.
So he can get down to a whisper on stage and still have clarity and volume, even in a whisper.
Right.
But then he can wind it up. And there is, it's heavy sounding. You can play heavy, hard stuff on it.
Right.
You just have to be prepared to to facilitate it with your own hands.
Right.
Whereas my rig,
right,
I can get away with skullduggery.
Legato.
I'm squishy.
Yeah. Well, it's a different thing, legato versus a hard pick type style like he has, where he's picking almost, seems like he picks most everything. Is it pretty much right? Is that right?
Yeah, unless he's doing like a hammer-on thing, like a regular. He's not like a.
Right.
If he does that, it's going to get into what I call the Bona Johnson, right?
Right. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So running those 5-note groupings and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's literally, he takes a lot of flack online. And I'll tell you what, anyone who wants to run their mouth, get up there. That's what I
played that.
Get on up there.
Get on up there.
I've watched him just decimate people.
Right.
Not trying to be a dick either. Just he can't help it. He plays fucking great.
It's kind of like you said. I heard you say this about Yngwie, and a lot of people give Yngwie a lot hard time too. But Yngwie, he's a monster. I mean, I don't. Yeah. You may not like his songs or whatever, but that guy's a monster. I watched him in the G3 tour when he was out with Bai and Satriani, and then they had that particular night was Nashville. They had Neil Sean on stage with him, Johnny Highland, all 5 of them. And Neil Sean and Ingve, man, were just going at it, bro. I mean, Ingve was just challenging Neil, and they were, Neil's they're not going to lay down either. And it was awesome, man, to watch these two.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Ingve, I saw Ingve in 1984 with Alcatraz.
Wow.
I was at Berkeley in Boston, and I took the bus and went on the Greyhound. And I didn't have money or anything. And I'm walking down the street, and, I probably got $10 and a pack of smokes. And I see him walking down the street, and I'm like, it's Ingve, it's him.
Right.
So I'm like, Ingve! And he stops, and he's in the black with the white boots and the hairs,
right.
And the necklaces and stuff. And so I just go up, and I'm like, dude, I can't believe it's you. Whoa. Yeah. And he's like, hey man, you got an extra smoke? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And he's like, can I get one for later? I'm like, yeah. And I give him the matches, and he lights up the smoke. He's like, thanks, man. He walks down into the arena. And I'm like, he just stole my matches.
Have you ever had any other interactions with Ingve besides that?
Yes. And all of them have been super pleasant.
Mine too. Every time I've met him, he's been pleasant. And there's that whole talk about him all the time, but I have never had that personal situation.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember how many years ago, because, we have our void of life there for a couple of years.
Sure.
But we were doing a cruise, and, Ingve lives in Miami.
Yep.
So Joe's assistant, Rick Gould, who's a fantastic rock photographer, a lot of the old guitars you see in Vintage Guitar on the cover and stuff, Rick does those photos.
Okay.
But he's known Ingve since forever. So he's like, hey, I'm going to get the maestro to come. We're going to go to dinner.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm in. So me and my wife, Joe and his girlfriend, we all pile down at this restaurant, and I get the text, red Ferrari approaching. Yeah. And so basically we had a great dinner with Ingve, his wife, his son, and all of us. And he was just super cool. And he says, are you coming to the show on Friday? And I'm like, what show? And he's like, well, we're doing this thing. Vi's coming, and we're going to go on this guitar cruise, but we're doing a benefit show here in Miami. And I'm like, oh, well, we're getting off the boat on Friday, and we're staying overnight. So yes, I'm coming.
Right on.
So we went there, and got to hang out with him like one-on-one. And I remember Nico McBrain was there jamming. Vi was there. He's super friendly. I'm sure you know that.
Yep.
Nicest guy ever. And, Nick Bocott was there. And my friend Marzi, who used to play with Phil Anselmo, he was there. So we're all just hanging out talking to Ingve. And, I actually have some photos where we're like talking, and like Ingve's got his hand on my shoulder and he's laughing. And so I'm like, I show people, I'm like, yeah, see, he's totally into hanging out with me.
Well, he's a
great guy. He's a great guy. And obviously you can't touch his vibrato, and, say what you want, but again, get in the ring with him, see how it works out. It's not going to work out good.
His vibrato on something like Save Your Love or whatever, the vibrato is just amazing. And his slow playing, people talk about his fast, everything's fast, but when he did do these great slow parts, they're amazing. They're just soulful, beautiful lines.
And you could, all you got to do is think about if you see some footage of Vi trying to play Alcatraz.
Yeah.
Not that he couldn't play it, but he certainly couldn't play it.
Yeah.
It was similar, but it was completely different. It was a lot more rigid.
Right. Sure.
And, Vi's not to be messed with either. I remember doing at NAMM a long, long time ago. Joe and I were there for an Ernie Ball event.
Right.
And we were at the sound check, and Vi was just going crazy. And we were just standing there like going, this guy is unstoppable. Like,
Right.
and he, and of course at that little jam night, I mean, we had Morse, we had Blue Saraceno. I mean, it was just like Albert Lee. It's like, how many great guys can be in the room? Like all of them,
Right. That reminds me of the 91 NAMM that I was at with Eddie, Morris, Albert Lee together all at once on stage.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was
just amazing.
It was a crazy event, man. That's unreal. The whole thing with Yngwie and that whole period, George Lynch. I don't know how you feel about George, but he was sort of like almost, he just didn't quite hit the big time with Dokken and all that.
Well, I think, and I haven't done anything better than him. Okay.
Yeah.
Mine is just an opinion as a rock fan. I never was into Dokken itself.
Sure.
I liked his playing, but because they didn't have a song that connected with me.
Yeah.
I was more interested maybe in DeMartini.
Yeah.
And rap, or Jakey Lee, because he had the Aussie songs.
Sure.
Which are a step above compositionally.
Sure.
And it's not necessarily Lynch's fault, because when he did Lynch Mob, then I really liked it.
Sure. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I've met him a few times out in LA at rehearsals and stuff, and he's been really friendly. And, he loves to play,
Oh, yeah.
And I'm firm believer, like, if you love to play, you can be at an entry level, but if your passion is there, then great. I don't have to like your band.
Right.
You probably don't like the band I was in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, right.
And that's fine.
Right. It's all about the passion for the instrument and playing and having a good time. And like you said, trying to stay away from a real job.
Yeah. I don't want to work, I mean, I don't, obviously touring, whether it's as a guitar tech or as a guitarist, it's work.
Sure. Right.
And I mean, I work at my local theater on the stage crew.
Absolutely.
And I just keep my mouth shut there. I don't offer advice. If they tell me go, plug these lights in, I go plug the lights in, coil these cables. Sure, buddy. I don't say to the guitar player who's performing, like, hey, you know what you should do you should put your buffer before your fuzz,
Right. I got you, man.
I don't offer anything I'm not getting paid for.
I got a question for you about the Gary Moore Greenie. You played this guitar, right?
I have. I've spent many years ago, this fellow who was trying to broker it brought it down so we could use it at Royal Albert Hall. So I had plenty of time to mess around with it, and we hung out like in the hotel, and we had we had 6 bursts there that day, and the price was ridiculous, and no deal was made, but we used it. And, Bernie Marsden was there with us. So we had his guitar, the Beast, and we had Joe. I think Joe, we had 2 or 3 with us. And we just had like a little party in the hotel. And, the guitars, it's a great guitar. It's ragged. It's been broken. It's, everybody's finger fucked it, so to speak. Along the line.
And in a car wreck, right? It was in a car wreck.
Yes. So it's got a headstock repair. There's some heel work done. Apparently Kirk dropped it and broke it again.
Right.
Everyone looks at a burst and goes, oh my God, it's so expensive. Well, you don't break $100 guitars, right? So
right.
But it's a great guitar. And then later on, another friend, in England named Richard Henry, he's a vintage dealer. He ended up getting a hold of it, and he closed the deal with Kirk. So a couple days before Kirk got it, Richard came down to our hotel to deliver an amp, and he's like, oh, I got a surprise for you in the car. And he pulls this gig bag out,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's Greenie. And he's like, I made the deal, so it's going to, it's going on its way. I thought you'd like to see it one more time, and so it's pretty cool. And I love that Kirk has it, he's out there gigging with it. He takes it everywhere he goes. It's right. Probably if he's in a restaurant, that's beside him at the table, And, there's another guy that gets beat up all the time by everybody, but he loves guitar.
Right on. Right on.
He doesn't have to be Yngwie.
Right.
And he certainly had the Metallica gig forever. They didn't go, well, we better get this new guy who just showed up, who's the hot thing,
Right. Well, it's all, chemistry is such a huge part of everything. I was just making that comment last week to my friend, and Mikey Mojo, about the chemistry between the Hagar, Satriani, and Bonham, not Bonham, and Michael. There's a chemistry there that works for this tour, and that's what we were talking about, and that's so much a part of.
I mean, they're not going to go and get the YouTube guy who can play Van Halen note for note.
Sure.
And of course, Satriani is not going to play Van Halen note for note.
Right.
And the thing is with that whole thing, because I'm not really interested in it. Okay.
Sure.
And more power to him. I mean, it's perfect to let people hear that stuff. I don't need to go see it.
Sure.
And the thing is, they never should have went on Stern and had him try to play Mean Street.
Well, yeah, that's what we said. He got kind of thrown under the bus.
Yes, he did. And look, I've been a Satriani fan since the first record, and I went to see him at his first gig in England in 1988 with Stu Hamm and Jonathan Mover. I took the bus from Newcastle to London, and I went and stayed at the Ibanez Rep's house. I got there at like 5 a.m. and went over there, and we hung out. And I made the pilgrimage to see Satch like come rip. And I mean, he's phenomenal.
Right.
I saw him last year. My friend Derek Sherinian was filling in on keys. Yeah. So I mainly drove down just to visit Derek. But going to see Satriani, it's like he's got a beautiful tone. Nobody's really ever carved out that instrumental rock and had success. Vi's done it a little bit, but he's esoteric with all the weird Lydian stuff. But Joe really knows how to speak to the beer drinker, the pickup truck driver.
Right. Yeah.
And he's a extremely nice man, and he's been taking a lot of flack for this gig.
Right.
And you know what? Again, get up there.
Right. Go to work.
But you know what? They're not going to call you because you're not their bro.
Right.
That's 4 bros hanging out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know they have a keyboard guy, but like those 4 dudes, Mike and Sammy hang out anyway.
Right.
And then they have their groups, right? Chickenfoot and then the Circle. So it's kind of an interspersed. It's like all of this stuff, it's all incestuous because of who you're pals with.
Sure.
It's not, it's chemistry, like you said. It doesn't matter if I can go burn through whatever. I'm not friends with Sammy Hagar.
Right.
He's all of a sudden he wants to be my new friend.
Right.
It's so I think it's great that they're doing it and people get to hear the songs.
Yeah.
And I do think it's funny though, like, oh, we've designed this amp that's going to sound like Eddie. Oh, really? Well, you want to just borrow this? Because I have a harmonizer and I have Roland delays, and like it's really a simple equation.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's what my basic setup here in the amp room is. It's a wet, dry, wet, and you can, when you're playing, you don't hear the delay. It just makes one guy sound big.
Right.
So I don't have a delay that's set like for David Gilmour or any of that.
Right.
I just have the standard thing. And it's funny because, everybody's got this rig. Tons of the Van Halen kooks all have this.
Right.
The drummer I play with, he's got it at his garage. He's got Wolfgangs and Ernie Ball and Stripe stuff. And he's got the full rig, and he's got 5150s and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And he plugs it in. It sounds completely different. I don't sound like Van Halen when I play through this,
Right.
you know?
Right. Right.
And you can pick all the dudes who are Van Halen goons, and they all have this in one fashion or another. Small versions, big versions. You know,
Right.
I have the luxury that I have no adult supervision, so I can have as many 412s in my dining room as possible. You know,
Right. Exactly.
so and of course, now I would love to go play a gig with this rig.
Sure.
Guess what's not going to happen? Because, like, you know, I went out last fall. I brought a 5150 and the nocturnal head, and I borrowed a cab off the opening band every night.
Right.
And I had 3 pedals, and I got the job done.
Right.
And I played clubs, and as soon as I played my first chord, the first thing you'd hear is, "You need to turn down." And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Okay. First of all, this is a metal band. Right.
Right.
Second of all, it doesn't say I'm coming to see the front of house guy on the marquee. Right. And I want to be compliant, but those guys will screw you. For some reason, they don't want the guitar to be heard. They want the kick drum to be heard.
Right. Right. Right.
And nothing against metal drummers, because I want to hear it too.
Sure.
But if you put me down here and the kick drum's up here, what the hell's going on?
Yeah. I know. Is that the struggle with volume in arenas with Joe or all the places he played over the years? Is there? I mean, he's got.
There's no struggle, because
right.
the joy of him writing the check is
right.
that he's going to play as loud as he wants. Period.
Right.
And it's super loud.
I was gonna say, but are there regulations in venues?
Oh, well, certain places have like at the front of house has to be X amount of dBs.
Right.
I think we've seen that more in Europe.
Okay.
Or outdoor venues where there's neighbors.
Right.
So that's kind of a combined decibel level because of the PA, but right in front of the rig.
Right. Right.
Stuff's kicking off, you know?
Right. Sure.
And of course, you know, he's got the shields in front, the plexiglass.
Yeah.
And then if you see on the stage, he's got 2 wedges in front and then 2 wedges on each side. So when he journeys off to solo on stage left, he's got the same sound. And then behind him, he has wedges, which has the band and the vocals and
so
stuff.
why the plexi then? Why if he
that's to tame the high end.
Okay.
And also to eliminate this decibel situation in the first front of the first 10 rows.
Right, right.
You know, because that thing is so loud.
Right.
So loud. Right. It's a beautiful loud, though.
Sure. But
it's probably comparable to, you know, the amount of volume Eddie would have had.
Sure. On stage. Yeah. Oh, for sure. He was loud.
You know, with the cabinets all over the place. I'm sure later on when Eddie moved to the wet, dry, wet, that everything changed in terms, you know, because it became a back line, and you'd always see the 3 cabinets mic'd, and they were the outside 3.
Right.
And, you know, so he's kind of getting a little away from it. But back when it was hodgepodge, you know, jamming any heads they could get, you know,
sure.
I'm sure that stuff was ripping loud.
Well, here's a question I want to ask you that you know, as a guy who's been out there forever, and with Bonamassa in particular, there's the rumor, and some of the people around Eddie in the early days have said this, that he preamped his Marshall with the Fender, his Bandmaster. What do you think about that? He did a slaving.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Just maybe.
People say maybe the first album was recorded that way.
Yeah, I mean the first album looks to be just a 1/412.
Right, right. In the photos, yeah. In the one photo.
In those pictures.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess the best judge of what was going on is the Japanese book where it shows all the heads.
Yeah, all right.
In behind, But I also remember Eddie saying, and I don't believe him.
Right.
He was making shit up too. But he had 3 sets of stuff.
Yeah.
So like, and part of it was so he could just switch to the Destroyer because it would be in tune.
Right.
And probably backups. And, of course, it all becomes much more clear once Bradshaw enters the picture and everybody's reading facts in Guitar Player, not just the drunk 20-something going, yeah, well, I just turned it up to 140 volts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was famous for his misdirection, but I think that was part of the brother and Roth were always telling him to misdirect. They were like saying, don't tell people.
Yeah, it's like talking to Billy Gibbons.
Right.
There's some kind of shroud of, there's all, but I mean, one time I did a jam thing with Gibbons, and I said, what do you want the amp set to? And he turned the tone off and turned the amp all the way up. And I was like, no way. And he just crazy.
It's kind of like didn't he have a Modern that there was he had an alleged Modern original?
Yeah, there's a picture of him in a car.
Yeah.
He's in a car and it's in the seat.
Okay.
But a lot about Karina. And I would have thought by now someone's going to come. They have one.
Yeah.
It's worth too much money.
Right. I agree. Crazy, right? Would he not?
And yeah, I mean, if a real Explorer is 700,000, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've seen them. I've played them.
Mm-hmm.
I've never sold one.
Right.
And I mean, I've played a lot of these, and several hundred bursts. So I don't really like nowadays. I'm not interested in any guitars except Karina and bursts.
Right.
That's all I got left in my hard drive up here.
Sure. Sure.
So, it's like, and I'm sure stories like, oh, there's so many fake bursts and there's fake flying V's. Well, there's far less than people think.
Right.
But there's also far less people who could tell you if they're real. You can be rich and buy things.
Right.
But see, I'm pretty poor and I can't buy them, so I'm into the details.
Sure.
And when Gibson made these things, the way they manufactured them had telltale signs of certain machinery, and it was factory. It was a production line.
Right.
They made them, and like they didn't make a wiring harness for one guitar. They made 100 harnesses in 2 days or whatever it takes. Right. So they're going to have certain things are going to be the same on every guitar. And, the thing is a lot of people who are successful don't want to, they want to appear knowledgeable and they don't want to hire somebody to come in. But I can think of like 4 people literally in the country that I would pick up the phone and ask questions about a flying V. And these are people I've known for 25 years, and they've taught me things. And, now I have a checklist and I have certain things that like I would never even tell anybody that I see. And I'm fortunate because, Joe had 3. I could take three of them out I have a friend who has 4 Vs. I can go to his house and lay them all out, and you can see the consistency of how they're manufactured.
Let me ask you that.
Same with the burst.
You just said 4. Is this the guy that I know from Chattanooga that had the Songbirds?
No. This is a private guy. Most people wouldn't even know
the Songbirds had
anything about him.
Songbirds had about 4 of them at one point.
Yeah, they had several. I've seen those guitars. I've never been able to look. I've never looked inside them, which I would love to. Not to disprove anything, just to confirm all my theories.
I think Vito's guitars were in that collection at one time, or there. I don't know if they were part of it. Right?
Yes. We had those on tour.
Yeah.
For the Three Kings tour, we had both of them, the V and the Explorer.
Right.
And at the time, I wasn't as digging deep as I do now when I look at this. But those 2 guitars, those are definitely real, and they're beast to play. they're pretty tough, and the Explorer sounds like nothing else in the world. It's huge sounding.
Wow.
And it's kind of a shame too that they didn't keep the pair together.
Yeah.
But, money's money, and
right.
And I can't tell people what to buy.
I was gonna say, isn't Gibson have the Explorer?
Yes, they have it in their vault thing there.
Yeah, the showroom, right?
The Gibson garage.
Yeah. I saw it.
Yeah. I've never been there.
Yeah, me either. I've not had a chance to go up there, but when Songbirds had all their collection together, I did go there. I did handle the 59V. It was a 59, apparently. And they had one other 58 in the main vault, and then a couple others. And of course, some bursts and a number of bursts, I think, at that place. But they've since that's changed. But
yeah, well, did you go in the vault room in the back?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So when we went there, dudes, I'm like, okay, let's get down to it. Where's the burst? Right. And he opens this drawer, and I blew his mind. I'm like, well, that's 85418, right? And 02188, and he was just like, how do you know this? I'm like, I've played all this,
Okay.
Like these things just didn't show up yesterday. They've been around.
Right. Oh yeah.
Collecting's been going on all the time, and
right.
I've just been fortunate because when, 10 years ago, we started inviting people with bursts to come hang out.
Okay.
So they just came out of the work, and, so we were able to document a lot of them, sometimes use them at the gig, the people wanted us to.
Yeah. One of my friends on Instagram, Chris, Chris from Mississippi. Is it Blakely?
Chris from Mississippi.
Has the
Chris, of course.
The trash bag V and a couple V's, right? Yeah. I follow him a little bit and some of his stuff that he got. Kossoff, right? Is it the Kossoff he has?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah. He's got some great stuff. And he's got an interesting thing too, because he's interested in storied guitars that are stuff that he's not looking for the only mint condition, whatever. He's looking for something that's been rode hard in a juke joint. And he just got like Jay Giles Flying V, which I hope one day I cross paths and can see that.
Yeah, that's the one that's kind of white. The white one, sort of white.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. That's cool.
It's all worse, but Jay Giles had that done in the 70s.
Right.
So that's okay. We'll let that, he probably paid $2 for the guitar, and actually, just to connect it to Van Halen, Chris ended up being my Sammy Hagar Charvel.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So, which, was, I got it off Zeke.
Okay.
Zeke Clark.
Sure.
And he was trying to sell some stuff, and I'm like, well, you got any Charvels? And he's like, I got one. And at the time, what he wanted was more than I wanted to pay. And so months later, this is well into COVID. We're kind of coming out of COVID, and we're going to doing shows. So he came down, he sold Joe a Les Paul, and he sold me the Charvel, and able to have full neck, but it had a Kaler. It's not my thing.
Sure.
And, I have so much stuff at some point, stuff's got to go,
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Or until I pull out 3 that match, and I'm like, well, I'm keeping those. Yeah.
Right. I was gonna ask.
Well, those are all black ones.
I was gonna ask you something about. This is the one of the biggest arguments on the internet, of course. Now, I'm gonna ask you this because you're a guy who's played all of these vintage guitars. You played hundreds of bursts, some of the most famous Flying V Carina guitars on planet Earth. How do you come down on tone wood and its effect?
It's there.
Yeah.
If we A/B this shit, right?
Yeah.
There's differences.
Sure.
But if you high gain this stuff,
yeah, goes away.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's all similar.
Yeah.
But let's say we take these guitars here.
Say Joe's rig though, not your rig.
Yeah. Okay. So if we put it through Joe's rig, you're going to hear differences, and it's going to be differences in the wood, because Rosewood neck Strats got a certain attack compared to a 50s maple neck, one-piece neck. There's a snap there. A hardtail Strat versus a trimmed Strat. Like if I plug in a Charvel into rig, it's pretty lifeless.
Mm-hmm.
It does. They don't play well together.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was going to play through his rig, be using a Blackguard, a dot neck, a burst, and the tone wood thing. There's to do videos, and they they take a piece of balsa wood and put a string across something, and
yeah. That's what I was.
There's got to be a reason that Holworth wanted basswood. He could hear it,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I owned his spruce-bodied Charvel for a while, and the thing was pretty plinky, And if I gain it up and put it through the harmonizer and the delay, I can get a nice tone out of it. But in general, the guitar was just it didn't have a lot to it. And I mean, I've heard Grover discuss, out of the 3 he made Alan, that was the one that got the least amount of attention. And oddly enough, it was the only one Alan ended up keeping for a long, long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like, I mean, I've played Alan's red one
mm-hmm.
when I was, a teenager at a gig, driving him crazy. Can I try your guitar, man? Can I try your guitar? And I brought Alan my Charvel Holdsworth, and he played it at a sound check one day, not with the band, but just sat there at the table with me. And he's like, this feels just like my guitar. I'm like, yes, I'm going to be great. No, I'm not.
Right.
Not that great.
Well, one of the things that I noticed when I listened to Joe play his V's is he says that in some video about them howling. They have a sound to them. I mean, and I have like 4 or 5 Carina guitars. Two of them are the 80s reissue Gibsons. One's a Explorer, one's a V. And I had a lot of experience recording with them. And for recording, it seems like it really does have an effect in the mix for me.
Yeah, and I mean, with the V, you've got the strings through.
Yeah,
kind of like a Fender in a way.
Right.
But then you have the power of the PAF.
Right.
So you do get a little bit of the howl is, again, we're talking about getting into the mid-range there.
Right, right,
you know. And the cool thing with the V is you get a little bit of snap like a Fender because
right.
of that string through. And then the Explorer, of course, as you know, you've got all that extra mass, which gives you an even, sometimes they can be a bit muddy in
Yeah.
a way. Like my hammers aren't muddy because of the maple top, but you know, the maple top on a hammer is like, it's a veneer.
Right,
It's
right.
not like on a Les Paul, you know. But they're what's the word I want to use? They're snappy too. Those hammers are snappy, you know.
Right, right.
And I mean, they look cool. Period. So
So yeah, you record. You did a lot of recording too when you were younger and throughout your life, I'm sure. And like in recording, when you get to a point where you're that critical listener, like you and Joe are, right? You can hear like half a dB at 10 or something. That's something you're going to pick up on, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's way more sensitive and smarter and attentive to that than I am because
Yeah,
I like gain
yeah,
and but I also know when something sounds not good.
right, right.
And what we all have to be careful of, I think, with all this home recording is having too much high end,
Right, sure.
you know, and also normally I record at home.
Sure.
So I've kind of transitioned from putting a cab in the other room and moving a mic because I'm here alone. I can't move the mic, and then it's going to take then I'll never get anything done.
Right.
It's like my buddy loaned me 2 Neve channels,
Yeah.
which were used on Thriller.
Wow.
So we made up the story that they were the 2 channels they put Eddie through, and
Right.
but so I have this $50,000 worth of mic pre's, but they're no use to me because I can't play and turn it and move the mic. And whereas my buddy who loaned them to me, he can look at it and go, I know what I'm going to do because he's an experienced engineer,
Yeah.
And I've kind of moved over to the aux box now.
Yeah.
And which is an amazing invention.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't, I'm the laziest guitar player ever. I have so much stuff I haven't finished and I haven't released because who cares? I'm going to go through all that to get 0.00001 cent from Spotify.
Yeah.
So once it's in stereo, I'm like, it's done. Who cares? Move on. And, but, doing the aux box, and lately I've been messing around with the Lion pedal.
Yeah. I'll
just
tell me about it. What do you think?
I think it's great. I think it could use I've used it on a couple of little projects lately, and maybe I'm trying to play music that isn't designed for that sag.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to play something that's a little chunkier, and it needs a little more tighter low end.
Okay.
But it gets a great brown sound. And a lot of the stuff I've been working on in the past few years at home has been the Metro Friedman into the aux box with a 412, everything on 10. And that's for any guitar, bass, doesn't matter to me.
Wow.
And because it was already wired, I didn't have to move anything.
Sure. Right.
And I mean, if I could have someone to assist me, I'd be way more productive.
Right.
And like most people, when I listen to me, I don't like it.
Right.
I'm like, oh, that's terrible. It's passable. And I know there's guys that probably, it's not that they're not as good as me.
Mm-hmm.
They just aren't focused on how they sound, or they haven't put the 10,000 hours in to be able to just play the guitar. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I feel like I've kind of regressed as well. Mm-hmm. Like if I go sit in somewhere locally, I'm crippled by the amp immediately. because there'll be some junk like a Marshall Origin or some shit like that. You can use the digital modeling amp, I mean, like I went and jammed with Joe last year in Thanksgiving, and I invited myself to sit in. Yeah. And so we're having Thanksgiving dinner, and I said, "Hey, by the way, I'm sitting in tomorrow." He's like, "You are?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." Every other dick with a guitar gets to do it, right? So he's like, "Yeah, okay." So I used a Les Paul and I used a Tweed Twin. Cranked right up.
Yeah.
Still not a fair fight with him. And but that was easy for me because I know the amp inside and out.
Yeah.
From day one. And I knew the riff. And his band is great. If you can't be brought up by that band to a new level,
right.
And and I didn't go and say, "Oh, I'm going to play a blues and I need a solo." I just went and played basically rhythm.
Okay.
And it was just for fun.
Right.
And and it was super fun. And and what was really great about it, my guitar teacher from when I was 14, I think.
Yeah.
His wife texted me a picture of Joe and I playing right after the show. And she's like, "Oh my God, we are in the crowd." And wow. I can just only imagine my teacher, who I'm still friendly with, all these years later. It must have, like, he didn't know I was there.
Right.
So I just come marching out there, right? And I can just see him going, "I taught him. I taught him everything he knows."
That's wild.
So that was a bigger highlight than actually jamming,
Right.
Was for him to see that,
That's cool.
And,
cool.
That was pretty fun. And now I'm thinking about going to see Joe at the end of the month, but he's doing his Blues Deluxe. I'm just going to bum some wine off him.
There you go. Let me ask you this question about the whole story behind the shark behind me over here on this side. There's the whole lore that it was Karina, then it's not. It's Ash, Sin Ash, and all that.
Stenwood, yeah.
Stenwood, right. And Eddie had put that out there, and even Chris Holmes said it was Karina, but there was never any Karina destroyers made, right?
No, and in the 90s, I was playing in LA, and my old roommate in Hollywood had a V, an Ibanez V.
Yep.
And I was playing Ibanez, so I wanted to buy the V, so I bought it. Mm-hmm. And then I was talking to the guys at Ibanez, and I said, I want you to make me a V with a backwards Ibanez headstock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and of course, out of the Karina wood.
Sure.
And he's like, "That's not Karina." And that's when I finally learned that it's a Karina finish.
Right.
It's a part of the ash genus, phylum, species, whatever, right?
Right. Well, clearly, when you look at it, the ash destroyer with that finish, it's ash. I mean, you can see the grain. It's clearly an ash body.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah, big grain, and
yeah. It looks like a flattened out baseball bat or something.
Right. Where green has got the tight grain.
Yeah. It's basically a mahogany of the family of mahogany, or so they say.
Right.
And of course they sound different.
Yes.
And completely, I'm sure, side by side. If you take the Destroyer and a real Explorer, you're going to be like, they both have their attributes, though, of course.
Yeah.
And I don't think Eddie used the Shark or a Destroyer because of the wood. It was just a cool guitar, because remember, it was white for a while.
Right, yeah.
And, and then, that red one that's in the pictures in the studio, which was Chris Holmes.
Yeah.
That belongs to a guy in California now.
Yeah, I played it. I've been to his house.
Oh, so you've seen all the stuff.
Yeah, I played it. Yeah, I've been to the museum.
And he has the Dumble trash can too.
Yeah.
Says Dumble right on. I always thought it'd be great if Joe bought the trash can and put it in the rig,
Yeah, that guitar, you know what I noticed about it? I mean, it was the scale length, of course, is one of the things about playing that's different, and
Mhm.
I, I felt like the neck was a little thinner than an Explorer neck, like the profile.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the main two things that I noticed when I was playing it. I mean, I was playing it through a JTM 45 cranked when I was there. And I enjoyed it. It was really comfortable to play. In a way, more comfortable than Explorer at certain neck profiles. I mean, I have a bunch of Explorers, so there's a little different here and there, but
yeah, and also think about it too. I mean, it looks like Van Halen. There was no shortage of gear.
Sure.
Like the amount of 412s they had at such a young age, but think about it. They're playing multiple nights a week, and they're getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
They're not rich, but they're not poor.
Right.
They're because they wouldn't keep going back.
They're dumping all their money into gear. I mean, yeah, he was always doing all kinds of things with all kinds of, experimentation, and he was borrowing some stuff. They were, the bands would like borrow each other's stuff, and it was really
I mean, it's like I loan out and borrow stuff all the time, and so what I do is like any of my friends' stuff that's here, I make a tag with their phone number and their name. So if I fall over dead,
right,
it's like call this guy because this is his.
Right. That's right.
And and my thoughts is like, if I fall over dead, just set this shit on fire. Who cares?
Was that meme that was going around with the taser that said whoever left standing gets the gear or something like that?
You're stuck with it, and I mean, and I think you don't see Eddie until it doesn't become apparent that he's getting a bunch of guitars until the photo session with the pickaxe.
Yeah, right. With Neil's Lozauer, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's when it registers, because that's when he gets on the cover of Guitar Player.
Right.
And that picture's in there. And that's what sends me like, I want to collect guitars. That looks cool. I can kind of almost recreate that photo. I just don't have a pickaxe. And
right. The Bumblebee, you got that.
Yeah. And, but like before that, and obviously we weren't seeing a lot of information in 78.
Right.
So, but it looks like he had one or two old Strats, like a 65.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was the same one. He just kept repainting it.
Yeah, there was one that he moved around, but that wasn't the Frankenstein that he actually had before. Yeah.
Right. And that's where he figures out that the pickup goes crooked.
Yep.
And then as we've seen these photos that have surfaced the past few years, we see the Frankie just no paint.
Right.
And then the story, I didn't know how to rewire it. I just put one knob. Well, there were two. There was a tone, there was a tone there.
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
And in the Bumblebee, there's one inside, just hanging there. And, so, he was a minister of misinformation, of course. And he knew a lot more than he let on.
Right.
It's like me. I don't like to install electronics.
Right.
I'm fully capable. I did a rig rundown once and I said, I'm not good at soldering.
Right.
And the comments were like, how does this guy get a gig? And And it's like, of course I can do it. I don't want to do it.
Right.
It's just like amp repair. I'm not going to get $1 more if I learn how to fix amps. Right.
Right.
They'll ship the amp off to an amp guru and overpay him to fix it. So let him do it.
Right.
And I don't want to get zapped.
Of course not.
And I also don't need a new hobby, And I've got great people locally to me who do fret work and, fix stuff. They cap the amps and, they can mod shit and, so it's fine, and I'd rather concentrate on understanding the history of the instrument, you know, the legacy of the Sunburst Les Paul and the Carino, and then this other little piece of my brain which knows all this stupid Charvel information, you know.
So the 58V that Eddie had, he used on Hot for Teacher, and some people say he even used it drop D on Jump for some of the rhythm tracks. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but that's one of the things that has been kind of talked about. What do you know about that Flying V? Do you know where it's at by chance?
I know it's not. I know it's been sold I think many years ago.
Yeah, about a decade, I think.
And along with the bursts too, the two bursts.
Yep.
Which I always wanted to go up there. Of course, to meet Eddie.
Sure.
But also, mainly, I wanted to see those bursts really badly. And they were probably gone by the time we were trying to manipulate. It always seemed like it was super complicated to go there. Like Matt Bruck was, you know, he was the firewall.
Right, sure.
So, and I know a couple people who knew a couple people, and we always tried to finagle it, and it just never happened. And and that's okay too. I kind of also appreciate the mystery. You know, I can still be a little kid about it, you know.
Sure, right.
I didn't show up and Eddie was all whacked out or something and acting crazy, or you know, wanting to show me his hip or something, you know.
There is that story where he pulls out the hip bone out of the refrigerator.
I believe it's true.
Yeah, I know it's probably true. That's wild. This is a joke that I guess he just liked to pull on people.
Yeah. Kay, can I make you a sandwich? Do you want to see my hip? And you know what? If I had a hip in my freezer, I'd pull it out too. You know?
Right.
That's the thing is, you know, I mean, there's a lot of. I'd like to think that, you know, if he, there's a lot of stories, you know, about Eddie being complicated.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, I read all the books.
Yeah.
And if you triangulate between Sammy, Roth, Valerie's books, there is a consistent issue there.
Yeah, right, sure.
And you know, of course, later on, he becomes much more forgiving and loving and friendly and stuff, you know. Yeah. I'll tell you, the greatest Van Halen story I have is, you know, he was going to Germany for treatment.
Yep.
When he was ill. So there's this I think it's Frankfurt, there's this hotel. So on tour, if we have back-to-back gigs, I wouldn't get a hotel. I would just sleep on the bus and wake up next to the dumpster and go about my day. So one of these nights, the entourage is at this hotel in Frankfurt. I'm waking up in the parking lot. I get a text from the tour manager and he's like, dude, you're not going to fucking believe it. Guess who I just ran into at breakfast? And I'm like, go on. He goes, Eddie and Alex. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. I'm like, you don't even own a Van Halen record. So this happens twice. And of course, you know, the tour manager, he elaborated the second time and he's like, yeah, Alex remembered me. And I'm like, bullshit. But it was like, why couldn't I have been there?
Right.
You know? And I've stayed in the hotel one time and Toto were there.
Yeah.
So, you know, hung out with Lukather.
Right.
And, who's crazy and funny and super nice and obviously will play circles around everybody. Yeah. Right. So at least I got to do that. And he was friends with Eddie's.
Right.
But yeah, it's just ironic. Like, you know, I'm the guy that would have just lost my mind at breakfast. You know, I wouldn't have been crazy or anything, but I would have like been thrilled to talk to him.
Sure.
And, you know, dude, can I get your omelet for you? You know, you know, but yeah, that's the irony. And I did meet Eddie at NAMM must have been 85.
Yeah.
And he was kind of he was moving forward.
Yeah.
and not interested in communicating with me.
Right.
So I was kind of bummed because I met everybody else I wanted to meet.
Right.
And, I'd met Yngwie there and Sheehan and all these people. And they were all super cordial, like everybody is at NAMM overall. But, Eddie was like, he would just be swarmed anyway. And that was early days,
Sure. 85,
for that stuff. But, I can't say that he would have wanted to hang out with me anyway.
Well, yeah, there was that whole thing he had where I don't know if it was his social anxiety, but his son talks about it a little bit in this latest thing with Behind the Music that he did. It seemed like just watching the videos, even now today, some of the NAMM things where it just seemed like he was so uncomfortable at NAMM and,
Yeah, and he was swarmed and they had to like move him through the crowd.
Yeah.
And, I was there. I've only been to the NAMM a couple of times. I was there and it must have been, would have been when he was with Peavy, I think.
Right.
He basically looked homeless. He had like this big sweater.
Yeah, I remember the year.
And I just remember seeing like this, this group of people moving, and I saw him and he went into that little booth room thing.
Right.
And I was just like, well, I'm not even going to attempt to go in there,
Right.
And the irony too is it's funny with Peavy that the 5150 designed for Ed, which obviously we know there's some influence from a Soldano.
Sure.
But it becomes the premier death metal amp.
Sure. Right.
And I bought mine because we were doing like I think it was my first Carcass gig in New York City. And we got to the gig and the rental amps show up and Bill Steer has the 5150 stack and I've got a JCM 900. And I'm like, oh, and of course, it's Bill's band, who might have bitch, right? I'm thrilled to have the gig. And so I jump in a taxi and I go to 48th Street and I buy a 5150.
Oh, wow. All right.
And they're like, well, what are you going to do with it? Well, my friends had driven down from New England to New York City to see me play this gig. So I just put it in their car. And I still have it and it's fantastic. And, I just had it capped after 30 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And the thing's great. And interesting, touring with some of the bands I was out with last year, they had amps, but they also had these quad things, quad Cortex, this little box.
Yeah, the little modeler, yeah.
And they kept complimenting me, like, your tone's, it's great. And I'm like, yeah, it's a tube screamer, a Boss chorus, and the amp.
Right, right.
And I had a delay just for like some spacey intros, but not like for solos. It's just basically dry,
Right,
right. And the 5150 was my only amp for, probably, I don't know, from 93 until 2008 or so. Or no, maybe 2003-ish. Yeah. And, and then I got the Friedmans and I started leaning back towards Marshalls a little bit. And, but then I brought the 5150 out last year. I'm like, I remember this. This is a good time. This is,
I was going to say, I was going to ask you about, his evolution with his gain as he went from, obviously, I should ask you this question too, because I'm going to ask Nick Bocott if I get him on here too. Because you would remember this. The signature amp thing happened. What was the first one you remember?
Geez, I almost want to say it's probably Eddie.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, and then Slash came later. Yngwie had one way later.
Yeah.
Marshall was really late to that thing, is what I was thinking. And why didn't Marshall get with Eddie? I mean, Jim knew Eddie.
Yeah, that's kind of weird too. I don't know if it's because he modded his amps.
Yeah.
And also maybe it's just maybe when they were touring back then, early days in England, they were on a time constraint. They didn't have time to go over to Marshall and sit down. And, I'm sure, I mean, Nick can definitely tell you a lot of history there with that company.
Right.
Because, basically he's Jim Marshall's right-hand guy for many, many years.
Right.
And, but yeah, I was, this discussion's come up recently with some people, like the signature guitar.
Yeah, sure.
Steve Vai.
Yeah. Right.
Like before that, I mean, sure, you have a Bob Weir model.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's not radically redesigning the guitar. That's an Ibanez artist with some inlay.
I got one for you. Ready?
Yeah.
This was touted as a signature guitar. And I want you to tell me who was in the ad. You ready? See if I can find it. Here you go. Whose signature was did they make this?
Well, that if it was blue, it would be a Steve Lukather.
That's right. They had Gary Moore in the ad.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes, I do.
And
it seemed like he when he went to Japan, Ibanez got all, hey buddy, those people aren't going to hurt you. The best thing you can do to protect your house is get a poodle.
I got two next door.
And he can also look in the mirror, and then I'm going to just shut him up.
Sure.
Here, buddy, come on. You can be on TV too.
All right. Oh,
there you go. Good boy.
Pretty boy.
He's a rescue dog from China. Oh. They were going to eat him. I don't know why they call that a meal.
Oh, Lord, look at that. So cute. What's his name?
This is Milas. He came with that name.
Milas.
We rescued him in March.
Oh.
So he's a good little boy.
Oh, look at that little face. That's beauty.
There you go. And the first week or two he was here, anytime I'd plug in,
yeah,
he'd be like, "Whoa," but now he's like, "Oh, you're terrible." He's like, "Come on, get that metronome out,"
So the signature guitar thing that we were just talking about, what were you saying about Gary Moore and that?
Oh, well, it seems like, back then, if you went to Japan, that you would end up, they just give you the Roadstar. But I believe Lukather's the first guy with his name in there, other than George, maybe George Benson.
Yeah.
Actually kicks off the signature model, because that was like 78-ish. Right? Yeah. But we don't see a radical, the George Benson's its own design.
Yeah.
We don't see a radical signature thing until Vai, really. Of course, Grover painted the stripes, and everybody had striped guitars all of a sudden, whether didn't matter what they had. If it was a Fender Strat, they put tape on it or whatever. Sure. And, showing you how incredible Eddie's reach was.
Yeah. Even my Gibson I had back there, I have a designer series. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they had the thin pinstripes.
Yeah, I have that.
Yeah. And of course, Vai's design is, it starts with the green Charvel.
Mm-hmm.
And those modifications.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, everybody wanted Vai. So, Hamer made him a guitar, Guild made him this crazy thing with like 36 frets and a handle. And, but once Ibanez locked him in, that became a whole different, with the low strings to the body, the routed tailpiece, the pickup switching, which was unique.
Right.
And the shape of the body, I lucked out. We were going to Japan in '87 with Benham, and our equipment trunk got taken off the plane because it was too heavy. So we arrived in Japan, and there's no guitars.
Right.
So I had just had my first endorsement guitar from them, which was in the trunk. And so this nice gentleman named Nero Ando, who was a big shot at Ibanez, he shows up with an RG 550 in Road Flare red and some other Ibanez spare. And he brings a Sabre 540S for the other guitarist who's not endorsed, but he just did it to be helpful. And of course, I used the guitar at the gig and I'm like, I want this guitar. And they had put a pink PAF Pro in it for me. Because when they said, what guitar should we bring you? I'm like, oh, bring me one of those green ones. And they're like, nah. And so I asked the tour manager, like, can I buy this? Do we have enough cash? And, I've just joined the band, really, I may be in the band like 6-7 months. And he's like, I'll see what we can do. So after the last gig, the Ibanez guy shows up and we're sitting there and he's like, I said, hey, I want to buy this guitar. He's like, well, I'd like you to just have it. And I'm like, oh my God, oh geez, this is the best. He goes, and I want to do a poster for you. And I'm like, a poster? Wow. Oh, geez. Right. And so he's given me this big Vibe poster as a souvenir. So I think I'm going to get this poster, right? And he pulls out this like centerfold size poster, and it's like with the band EZO, the Japanese rock band. Okay. And he's like, I want to do a poster like this of you. So he did do the poster. And he let me pick the photos from photos they took. And it was cool to be on a poster,
Right on.
And that's like that's a rock guitar player's dream, especially back then for me.
Sure. Yeah.
It mainly got distributed in Europe and Japan because I was living in England at the time. So, and they had an Ibanez guy, Masashi Inui was his name. And he ran the Ibanez artist relations and custom shop out of his flat in London. Wow. So he had like a spare bedroom with boxes of necks and bodies and Ibanez edges, and he would just screw shit together for you. And so I seized the opportunity of being endorsed to buy some more guitars, and I got a green gem. And over time I bought a few more, and then later on, once I joined Carcass, Bill Steer was playing a Sabre, and the bass player had like a 5-string RG thing. And so I got them endorsed. And then after that, I wasn't really, once I finished that gig, which was in the 90s, I was like, I don't need to be endorsed, right? Like I have tons of shit. And now I don't need to be endorsed because I don't have to. Well, I bought all this shit. I got too much. And I also want to be able to say what I think about products.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So there's no like I can say, I don't like this contraption of a trem they use on an Ibanez now. Right. The roller, whatever.
Right.
Just put the edge tremolo on there and not the low one either. The regular one.
The regular one. That's like that. That's like that bridge on the Roadstar. That was one of those locking at the bridge.
The Pro Rocker.
Oh my God, it's such a terrible. And all the pieces fall out.
I still have. So when it came time to get another guitar, I said I want to design my own.
Okay.
So I got a gem body. So I've got the cutout that goes all the way. And the RG's angled here. Okay. So this is cut out like a gem. And I have the jack down here like a gem. And then I said, I want the pickup screwed in the wood like Eddie.
Right.
and I want the neck pickup slanted like Jake E. Lee,
Okay.
and I want an HS3 like Ingve, and a PAF Pro like Vi, and I want an ebony fingerboard like Holdsworth, and I want my name inlaid like all the Ibanez guys on their signature guitars.
There you go.
I put it there. Usually they would have them up here, you know.
Yeah.
And I wanted binding too, and a reverse headstock like Hendrix. And so they made me this, and it's fantastic. It's been on, you know, I've toured with it a lot. And actually, this pickup, if you plug it in, if you touch it, it makes, you know, it's got a broken coil or something.
Yeah.
So someday when I'm not lazy, I have new pickups to put in it, and that's just the cover. There's nothing there now.
Right.
But yeah, it's a great guitar, and it's seen a lot of use. I just broke it out recently and restrung it and tuned it to normal because I kept it in B for, I don't know, since the early 90s.
Right. Did you know Rich Lasner when he was at Ibanez?
He's the one who gave me the endorsement.
Okay.
And he was very kind. You know, I probably seemed like a psychopath to him. But he went out of his way to help me. He gave me the endorsement. I didn't even have a record out yet. I sent him a cassette I made of a cassette of the mixes of a Venom record that wasn't even out. And by the time it came out, it went from being, it was going to be on a certain label, that it got downgraded to another label, to a side label, to basically
right.
You know, and you know, eventually I just gave up on the endorsement thing. And you know, once you get tons of shit, you know, it's like,
right.
I mean, Mike Tempesta has been great to me, who's hooked me up with some Van Halen stuff.
Right.
And you know, he doesn't have to do that, because, you know, my only influence is this big to like, you know, to like 20 other Van Halen goons, right? So, you know, it's not like if I use your product, you're going to start selling things, you know. And
right.
people all the time want, hey, I make pickups, can I? And I'm like, man, I'm never going to get around to it.
Right.
I'm so lazy, and I got enough pickups, and you know, there's DiMarzios, there's Duncans, there's Arcanes, you know, and they're all fine. I can make them all do the same thing, you know, and I don't want the extra work.
Right. It's just one more thing on your plate. I know how you feel about that. It's crazy like that, man. You know what? Rich Lasner went to Yamaha after he was at Ibanez, right?
Yes.
And I was working for a dealer in Birmingham, Alabama, where I'm from. And I won a contest to go out there and have anything I wanted made.
By Yamaha?
By Yamaha, right? So, of course, I did what you did. I incorporated every element of cool guitar stuff into one guitar. I'm going to go get it, and I'll show it to you. Hold on.
Okay. All right. That's as close to Van Halen as you get out of me. Well, this should be good. Because this guitar has a Rich Lasner connection too.
What's the connection with it?
Oh, well, he was just in charge at the time.
Yeah.
And helped facilitate it. This is all Japanese made, though.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't done in Bensalem.
Right.
Look at that. Oh, yeah. Shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
I like that.
So that's sort of a Pacifica in a way.
It is a Pacifica. It's a custom shop from their custom shop in LA.
Wow.
Reverse head.
Well, it's basically this guitar, but a Yamaha.
Right. What I did was I did the same thing. You put the pickup into the wood, right, in the back, and then I have this is a JB in the back with a stagger strut left in the front. Shaler Floyd.
Okay.
Ebony board with partial scallop. 10 to 22. Lights in the fretboard, LEDs. You got the veneer on the. It's a matching veneer to the wood, right? So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, pretty cool. And then what else? I've had the push pushes put in this thing so it would flip flop between these two. So if you push that, it'll just flip flop.
Oh, wicked.
But it also do 5-way, so it'll split coils. And then
Wow.
this push is for the LEDs when it's plugged in.
So what year is that? Like 89 or something, or 90?
91.
91.
Yep. And
Wow.
check out the back of the neck. I don't know if you can really see it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
This is all picked out of raw plank when I went there.
Wow.
So we did the whole.
It's fantastic.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Oh, look at those covers. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. They're all veneered.
Amazing.
Isn't that wild?
Wow. Wow.
What's cool about it is look at this. Okay, you got the middle is alder.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's got 2 maple tops, so back and front.
Yeah. Wow. That's just spectacular, huh?
Right. So it's
look how it's. Oh, I see. It's scallop just for the high strings.
Yeah. Partial scallop.
Kind of like a Sheenish thing, which they used on his bass, right?
Yeah, and they used it. George Lynch used it on the Bones guitar. Remember when he had the Bones with the partial scallop?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted the George Lynch scallops with the George Lynch pickup configuration, and then sort of the Eddie color. This was the purple from the Ernie Ball at the time. I took Rich the ad and I said I want this color. You know what was funny about that is I didn't know this at the time, but where I was staying in Hollywood, the Sportsman's Lodge was like right down the street from Eddie Van Halen's house. I had no idea that I was working on this guitar, copying his color and everything right down the street from his house.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I lived out there, it didn't occur to me that, and of course, I'm in a tax bracket of no tax because I don't have any money.
Right.
I'm just trying to get some pizza and some weed, and maybe meet, a stripper. And it never occurred to me that I could go find, Eddie or anybody.
Right.
And now that, I have friends who live up in the hills.
Right.
And I'm a grown up. It's like, oh, of course, my neighbor is so-and-so. Right. And tucked in this little canyon, there's all these people with home studios who are famous rock guitar players with cool guitar collections. And, it's like, it didn't cross, like my whole life revolved around basically getting to and from my job in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And then trying to, party and maybe, audition for a band or two. If I could, I didn't have a method or, actually, I just went there. I didn't have a plan. Everything turned out to be kind of accidental. And I like to say I joined all the wrong bands at all the wrong times, And, but
that's what's funny is Derek Sherinian, your buddy, was at that party, that backyard party, and played keyboards that night with a friend of mine, Eric Dover, who was also the singer that night. And who was else? Oh, Brian Tishy's been on, and he was there too.
Yeah. Brian. Now there's a guy who can play Van Halen solos.
Right.
He's fantastic.
I know.
So, and it's funny because like he and Derek we're going to learn Push Comes to Shove. And they text it to me, and Derek's like, okay, bro, it's your turn. And I'm like, why do I got to do it? You just did it.
Right. Learn all of that. Yeah.
And you'll see he always likes, I've known him since 1983. So,
wow.
And he is the self-proclaimed greatest rock keyboardist. But he definitely is. He's fantastic. And, his solo albums, which are probably overlooked by a lot of people because of distribution.
Yeah.
But he's got everybody on there. Right. He's got Yngwie, he's got Luke, he's got Zach, he's got Holdsworth, he's got Sykesy, I mean, it's just amazing the talent he culled. And you can also notice in some of the compositions, he writes them in the spirit of, like, if it's Sykesy, it's got kind of a white snaky chord progression,
Right. Right.
And but he's a fantastic musician. He was fantastic when we were teenagers.
Right.
He
Right.
was already there, you know,
Right.
and he only played with me because I had a Marshall and a Charvel, and I had semi long hair, and I met him through my friend Sean, who had the blue and white guitar, because
Okay.
Sean went to summer class at Berkeley,
Okay.
and I went down to hang out, and I met Derek, and then Sean just went for that one summer session, and he went about his business, and I was already enrolled for September.
Hmm.
So lo and behold, like 3 days into being at Berkeley, I'm walking down the street and there's Derek, and I'm like, bro, and he's like, bro, and then we formed like this metal fusion band, and we'd play like 5 hours a night, because you can get a practice room, sign out for 2 hours, so we'd each get 2 hours.
Oh, I got you.
And then and we play live a little bit, we were so loud. I had a 100-watt Marshall. Nobody in school had that. Nobody had a Charvel. They were just starting to sell Charvels across the street at a place called Daddy's Junkie Music. And most of those are Calored or brass bridged, so they weren't Floyd's. And then I ordered a Rhodes with a Floyd, which I had to buy the Floyd and mail it to Grover.
Right.
Like, he couldn't just drive down to Guitar Center and make it easy on me,
Right. Right.
And it's funny that you made that guitar like this as well. Shortly after I got this, Ibanez came out with the RG 565.
Okay.
Which had a reverse headstock,
Right.
a single coil in the neck.
Right.
But I could be wrong, but I think this is the first direct mount guitar in the market. It's it's only one of one.
Sure. Yeah.
So, because shortly after this, everything becomes direct mount.
Right.
Early 90s, right? This is an 88.
Yeah. Right.
So, they started doing this in 90, probably about the time Eddie came out with the Music Man.
Right. Right.
When Ibanez started doing the USA Customs and things. And then now it's like everybody has a direct mount, and there's you can market, like FU Tone has the little bracket you can put in there and stuff, and yeah. I mean, there's lots of stuff you can do. I don't change, like on my Floyds and stuff. I don't go and get titanium, and I'd be at it all day long. And also, these are all old Floyds.
Okay.
They have screw-in bars,
Right.
not thumb collar bars. They're from the 80s, and I mean, they were fine for Eddie. So, like, I have this whole thing, like, it's like people who want to improve a Les Paul Jr. I don't know, put on a mountain record and tell me that it wasn't fine.
Right.
Right. Or, oh, we're going to make the Les Paul better. I don't know. I think it was fine in 59. It was perfect,
Right. Right.
And yes, I get guitars were designed in the era of flat wounds and whatever.
Yeah.
But they're not that out of tune. And if you can hear that, then you probably can have the job that I have sometimes, which is tuning for a living, which I'm super sensitive when I go see a band.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I bet.
And, and you hear people say, oh, Les Pauls don't stay in tune. I think you don't change your strings enough, or you don't know how to properly string a guitar.
Yeah.
Because, I get it. You got to, if you're playing 3 sets a night, 12 songs a set, well, yeah, you're going to have to tune at some point.
Sure.
And, but
I saw how you do the stringing. I was watching your video on that online, where you did how you string a Les Paul in particular, but it's a pretty, pretty cool way that you go about doing that. And
it's simple.
Yeah.
It's really simple. Anyone can, I see people put it on, this is how you string. You can do it any way you want.
Right.
But for me,
Mm-hmm.
it's very simple. I pull the string to the next tuner.
Mm-hmm.
I pull it back. I go over. And then I go under twice or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And stays in tune great. And I want to take it off quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, of course, say with Joe, there's a rack of guitars. You know, there's a plan B for everything on that stage.
Sure.
Just like any band of professional level, there's plan B.
Sure.
You know, if you're wireless, there's a button.
Right.
If you're in Judas Priest and you're Andy Sneap, then the guitar tech Rob has the same pedal board right there in case Andy Sneap is getting cool, right?
Right.
But I also, if the artist breaks a string, I want to have that guitar ready to go right back into play.
Okay.
And obviously, if it's a Floyd Rose, I'm probably not going to be working there anyway, because I don't want that job.
Right.
But the way I do it, these come right off. I don't have to manipulate it.
Right.
There's no knot. There's no bullshit. And of course, professional guitar players have endorsements and get boxes of strings.
Sure.
So money's not an object. And I think if you change your strings regularly, if you're performing in public, you should have the courtesy to change your strings for your crowd and for yourself, for your tuning.
How often do you think what amount for a regular player like myself who plays every weekend? How often?
It depends how many songs you're going to play on one guitar.
44, sometimes 45 on one night.
On one guitar?
Yeah. All the way through.
I would change my strings that day.
Every day.
Every gig, yeah.
Yeah.
And I can only use Joe as an example.
Yeah.
He has songs that are specific to guitars, right?
Yeah.
So the 335 might only get used one song.
Yeah.
So I would probably change those every 3 shows.
Okay.
But a burst may get used for 3 songs a night.
Yeah.
I would change them every day or every 2 shows.
Right.
It depends though, because it could be like I've got a big master plan at his gig to go and change strings.
Uh-huh.
And then he calls me and goes, dude, I found 3 shops.
Right.
Hop in an Uber or I'm coming to pick you up,
Guitar Safari.
Yeah. And then the safari starts and all regular work goes out the window,
Right.
But anybody of that professional level, unless they have a screw loose, if a string breaks, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
If you blow a tube, it's going to happen. Battery better never die. If your excuse is, I forgot to change the battery, you got to go,
Right.
But, amps blow up, strings break. I string the Les Paul a unique way, which I see a lot of people doing, is I added additional ball end.
Yeah, I saw you doing that in that interview.
And I figured that out in the 90s.
And you overwrap every time on all of them?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
If it was someone bringing a burst on a loan, it's up to them.
Okay.
You'll find most collector guys, the big boys, they're like, I don't give a shit. Do whatever you want.
Really? Okay.
And so I started doing it. First, I was top wrapping. This would be about 94. And I top wrapped because Billy Gibbons did it.
Right.
And I thought it was cool. But then I was like just catching the little pointy bit every now and then. And then I started noticing I'd break some strings at the bend.
Okay.
So I just pulled it back so it was off where the winding ends, which should be strong, you think. But right there, it's super fragile.
At the point, where it connects.
And if you think about just moving it back, so the core, in theory, is going around. It seems to have worked. It's worked for me all these years. And when I met Joe, he was breaking a few strings. So first I did the E string, and then I did the B string, and then I just a few weeks into it, I just did the whole whack the way I do it. And at first I think he didn't, seeing the ball end, but then the theory was proven. We stopped breaking strings.
Right.
And then over many years, we broke about 4 strings.
Right.
And that's partially having new strings.
Right.
Stretching them to the point of they may break before he gets the guitar.
Right.
So if I'm teching for you, I'm going to be wailing the shit out of the Floyd.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to play some riffs in the key you're in. So if you're in a song in E, I'm going to bend up here. Right. And just really honk on it. Yeah. And the minute I give you the guitar, it's as good as it's ever going to be.
Right.
Once you play one note on it, that's your problem.
Right. I have that same philosophy about when I'm stretching my strings. Like, if I'm going to break it, let me break it right now at home.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I just did my little run in the clubs, and I didn't break any strings. I'm using 11 to 54.
Okay.
Tuned to C sharp.
What was Joe using for his Les Pauls?
Those are 11 to 52 tuned standard.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Which you think would be stiff. You get used to it pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a nice feel. It feels good. It feels solid.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, I was about 3 gigs into the tour last year, and I went to a pawn shop and I bought a Wolfgang.
Yeah.
And so, I brought it back and I restrung it just to try it at sound check,
Yeah.
And I plugged it in, and I went from having a single hum Charvel to having, now I've got the neck humbucker. I can play, fantasy Sykes licks or something,
Right.
And I ended up using that guitar for the rest of the tour and never swapped out again. I just leaned the Black Demon in the corner, like, don't need this anyway. And, but I changed the strings regularly.
Yeah.
And it stayed in tune.
I was just saying, how quick does a string, intonation start to be affected by it being on the neck? The tuning problem?
Well, if you feel under it, you can feel the frets, like where it's dug in.
Yeah.
So like this guitar, I haven't restrung in a while, so I can feel every fret under there.
Okay.
And if I was going to go play somewhere, I'd restring this before I go, because it takes less than 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So, I can hand a pro guitar player 2 songs, you'll feel marks under the wound strings.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
The guys who, are out there for blood,
Sure.
I mean, I would imagine someone like Holdsworth, he had a very floating touch.
Yeah.
And more like a typewriter.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Whereas a lot of guys they're not squeezing the hell out of the neck. They're pretty calm, but they're digging in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you have big vibrato.
Yeah. Eddie dug in pretty hard from what we can tell from some of the videos where you hear him just playing acoustically on the electric neck. You can hear that the attack, even with that the light pick he had.
Yeah. I found that interesting. And he also seemed to be floating a lot too.
Yeah.
But and the other thing which is overlooked with him, I think, is how little gain he had.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Yeah. Sure.
And like there's some little clips on Instagram. There's one of them playing Hang 'em High, and it's almost twangy. But that sustain is still there, like it's explosive. And he used really light strings. And, so I'm not sold that heavy strings equal tone.
Right.
It's about your comfort. Let's go down the list. Eddie, super light strings. Yngwie, super light strings. Billy Gibbons used to use 11s, super light strings.
8s, right?
7s.
Yeah, 7s. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how he does it. I've tried it on these guitars, and I'm like, yeah. Holdsworth, super light strings. These are all some of the biggest tones in the world.
Right.
With super light strings, and it's just got to be their delivery.
Right. Their hands. What about Bonamassa's picks? What was he using?
He uses Jazz 3s.
Okay.
And when I met him, they were red. And then we got a bunch of different types: silver, gold, and kind of a glow in the dark. And we just tried them all, and we settled on the gold ones being the best feeling in your hand. And I guess technically they're like Herco gold.
Okay. So they're not super thick. I mean, hard.
I mean, they're standard
Jazz 3.
Standard Jazz 3. They just have his name where it would say Jazz 3.
Yeah.
Mine just say Jazz 3.
Right. So it's
everyone thinks my name's Jim Dunlop.
Right.
and the thing with the Jazz 3, other known conspirators, John McLaughlin, Eric Johnson, Vernon Reed, all Jazz 3 guys, Bonamassa. Interesting thing for me, I started using this pick in the 80s.
Yeah.
I got used to the size.
Sure.
So it fits in there. Just the tip is there, just the tip, kids. That's all you got to put out there. And if I use a regular pick, it's like having a tortilla chip in my hand.
Right. It's too big. Yeah.
And it doesn't have that nice point.
Yeah.
And
I always thought it was interesting, like with Yngwie's picks, which I have one right here.
Yeah, I got one too.
The 2.0 Delrins, they're really hard.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I can go between this and a 96, but I think it's because he really feels the string under it. I don't know. Maybe it's the same thing with the Jazz 3. You really get a strong rebound.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a foothold, Yeah. And for me, a softer pick feels like it's failing.
Yeah.
But then you turn around and Eddie's got this
right.
I don't know, medium light or something.
46, I think.
And it's like, now, of course, if you're recording and you're overdubbing 12 string, you don't want a Jazz 3.
Sure, right.
You want more of a Dunlop, I don't know, mid to light.
Sure.
So it flexes and it chimes the strings.
Right.
But I can play a normal pick on a bass, like a purple Tortex.
Yeah.
And
remember this is a 2.0, but in the regular style.
Okay, my friend Jim Clare, who used to play in Venom with me a long time ago, he used those.
Yeah.
And it's always funny because people are like, oh, which solo's you on that Venom thing? And I'm like, well, if it's melodic and really well put together, it's him. If it's chaotic and messy, it's me, I mean, I got to a point where if I'm going to record, I like to write a solo now.
Yeah.
My improvising is, it can get questionable halfway through. It's like, when I think I'm being clever.
Remember these? This is supposed to have been Carlos Cavazos metal pick, but these are great for pick slides. You ever do pick slides with these things?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's that classic Van Halen thing. Crazy.
Yeah, my buddy made me this.
Okay.
This is titanium.
Wow.
So it's a Jazz 3 titanium.
Titanium. Wow.
And I've just been messing with it. It's pretty good.
And I assume it's pretty light, right?
It's heavier than a regular pick, and it's slightly it's almost the same thickness as a Dunlop for me.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no give. But it's very rounded, so it's kind of soft, like it glides nice. But I literally just found this in a box the other day after years, and I was like, I'm going to start messing with that, you know?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, for me, the Jazz 3 is where it's at, and
Really?
you know, for many others, I mean, I think Corey Feldman's using one too.
I noticed that the other day.
Now, what's your take on that? Do you think he's doing this like like it's comedy, right? He's trying to fuck with people.
I guess. I mean, I don't even know, man. It's crazy, right?
Especially because the singer in Limp Bizkit is like coming out and sitting there, like it seems staged.
It probably is. I mean, it's working.
Hey, he's getting more people are listening to him play guitar than they are us. You know,
right?
You know, I
got to ask you this question about Ed. I had heard this for a long time from people who worked on his guitars that a lot of his guitars were just terribly set up when they got a hold of them.
That's what I heard. Like the Frankenstein is just a piece of junk.
Yeah, like terribly set up.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Because if you look at, you know, the black and white Frankenstein and it's in Japan. It's like a full length shot, front and back.
Yeah.
The neck's crooked and the strings like kind of hanging off the fretboard.
Off the fretboard.
And you know, he used to talk about he'd jump off the riser and the neck would shift and stuff. But also think about it. He's back there doing what you do at that age in a successful band, right?
Yeah.
So he's, you know, he's got some liquid nitrogen going on or whatever in his cup. And he's bored. There's nothing to do on tour, right?
Right.
So he goes, well, I'm going to unscrew this neck. Oh, look at this Les Paul. I think I'll take this PAF out of the Les Paul and put it in this. And then all of a sudden, you know, the Circle's neck is on Frankie.
Right.
And Frankie's neck is on the Black and Yellow. And, you know, I think, you know, at the Met, the final incarnation, I think that neck is the Circle's neck. I think.
That's what everybody says. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I also think, and I could be wrong, that the original Bumblebee neck was on the Rasta.
Okay. The one that Weasel had for a while.
Yeah. And that was another ill-fated thing of having Dweezil come over to Joe's and bring that.
Yeah.
And then timing just, you know, I mean, everybody's got a gig, you know.
You didn't get to try it.
No, we didn't. And, you know, because James Santiago from Universal Audio, you know, his wife plays in Dweezil's band.
Okay.
And they're all tight and everybody, you know, it's a small world. And so he'd be like, oh, I'll call Dweezil, man, and we'll get him to bring the Rasta. You know, and George Trips, he's been to 5150 because he did the pedals for Eddie and stuff.
Right.
And, you know, whenever he was up there, he'd like take a selfie and send it to me, like standing in front of the Rude or whatever. And I'm like, really? You know? And because, you know, everybody loves Ed.
Right.
Everybody.
Absolutely.
If you don't like him, and you play guitar, there's something wrong. And if you don't like Van Halen, I don't get it because it's a pop band, it's a metal band, you know, it's a bluesy band, it's a funky band.
Right.
You know, and of course, you know, I'm getting older, so like, I don't want to hear the new band, whoever they are. Good for them. But there's no way I need to listen to, let's just call it, you know, the Joe Blow rock band. I don't need to hear your band because I don't have much time to listen to music. So I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to listen to the great music that I love. You don't have to listen to it. But if I'm going to throw shit in the car, it's going to be Halen. It's going to be Holdsworth. It's going to be Aerosmith, ZZ, McLaughlin, like the greats, Yngwie, you know. I mean, John Sykes, like,
right.
You know, just I mean, these are, everything's derivative now completely.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Yep.
here's a great example. The great, amazing Andy Wood.
Yeah.
He is spectacular.
Right.
But there's no Andy without Eddie.
Oh yeah. Right.
There's no me without Eddie.
Right.
There's no you without Eddie. There's or a host of guys, because let's face it, we all have like 10 childhood influences that just never leave.
Sure.
But now music is so derivative. Even, if I'm writing a song, it's going to have some influence of Priest, Ozzy, Van Halen, Maiden, probably something from some of the bands I've been in, because I joined bands as a replacement,
Right.
And I had to learn all those songs.
Right.
So that influenced the way I would make up a riff, or like the amount of like, I just had to relearn Venom songs to go play. And I had just done a podcast with these Venom fans, and they were like, "Oh, you ever want to go out and play that stuff?" I'm like, "I hope I never play it again. I'm all set."
Right.
And then like 3 weeks later, I get called by Mantis, and he's like, "Hey, I got to bail out on the tour. Can you fill it in for me?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess I can," since I mean, the circumstance was health reasons, and
right.
And so I signed up for X amount of gigs, and they've been, Venom Inc. have been touring recently, doing festivals, South America and some European shit. And, I just bowed out months ahead and said, look, I'm just going to step back. If there's an emergency, call anytime. But at 59 years old,
right.
I don't want to play Mantis's riffs anymore. And I love his playing, and it was a great education. And I love, the guys I was playing with in that group at the time.
Right.
It's all cool. But if I'm going to make the effort to put something together, like I have a drummer friend that I play with who has all the he can play more Van Halen songs than me.
Okay.
On the guitar. And he collects everything. Like, I mean, he's got the singles, the poster, the tour books, the whatever.
Right.
So him and we have a little repertoire of things, stuff I've written, stuff we've kind of put together. And, where I live in a rural capacity here in New Hampshire, the gene pool here for musicians is pretty small. Right. So finding a bass player, there's great bass players, but they show up with the dreaded 5-string. Right. They show up with the necklace. They show up with this. Right. Right. I don't want any of that. I want a Fender bass slung down here.
Precision bass.
It's got to be a P bass. Got to be a P.
P bass, right? I was going to ask you about Gary Moore, and you because when I was a kid, I came across him in the early '80s. Victims of Future. Yeah, kind of when he made that transition, where Victims of the Future, when he did Shape of Things, all those things. And I just thought this guy was insane, player. And obviously Joe had great respect for Gary, and you guys had the greeting out and all that. Did Joe and Joe and Gary had any interaction?
I don't think they ever played together.
Okay.
I think they were on like a North Sea Jazz Festival together or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I almost want to say Gary was hot and cold with people.
Yeah, I knew that.
So maybe I don't think he was sociable at some point, and then another time he was super nice.
Yeah, right.
I mean, everybody's been a dick at some point. I mean, and hopefully as you get older, you can just say, well, you know, if I run into that person, they'll be man enough to accept the apology.
Right,
know?
right.
I had a whole different agenda when I was 21, 22 than I have now.
Of course. When I think about Eddie Van Halen in the early days, I think, you know, he's a kid. He's 23 when that album hits, and he goes into this, you know, incredible ride that this.
Yeah, and think about it. You're a kid.
Right.
Everyone's patting you on the back. You're partying. There's chicks. Right? I mean,
you never left Pasadena almost, except once.
Yeah, and when you left, you didn't come back forever.
Right.
You know? and you know, that makes me think of something too, which I'll interview you now.
Okay.
What do you think? Because I have a theory. This whole micro tuning thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So
like the B.
How do you feel about it?
Dropping the B down a little bit. You talking about for Eddie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, sweetening the tuning. You mean what do you mean by that?
Yes.
I mean, he did it, right?
You think so?
I thought he did it on Running with the Devil for sure, right?
I mean, do you think he was doing it systematically and like using the strobe tuner specifically to this, you know, point, whatever?
I don't know if that was so much if he just did it by ear. What do you think?
Well, first of all, if I was him,
yeah,
and I was 20 something,
right?
I've got a nose full of blow. I've got a belly full of booze, and I'm trying to pick up, you know, 2 or 3 chicks in case one of them says yes. I'm thinking he didn't have some kind of, you know, concept of it, but maybe it's just like when I tune the guitar, I'll listen to the D's, I'll listen to the A's, and I might just yank one. But I don't think he was like all this analyzation we see online of it.
Yeah.
And then let's add in, there's a phase 90.
Right.
There's a flanger.
Yeah.
Later on, there's a harmonizer, right? So how are these guys figuring out the sense?
Right.
When there's an eventide on the recording.
Right.
Like, and, you know, more power to them.
Yeah.
I just think, like, I don't know, man. I get the thing of like trying to get it in tune. Like, this song has a lot of D's in it, so let's make sure the D chord is really closer.
Right, it's tight. Yeah.
But he's also tuning on the fly because that thing's going out of tune like crazy initially.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think honestly, like you said, it's more like it's not that kind of thought process. Like you said, it's more like he's just trying to get it in tune.
Yeah, as close as possible on the spot. And then think about when he's got the Floyd shows up.
Yeah.
Now he's got a whole new thing of fighting with that. Yes, I see the Peterson strobe tuner backstage. You know, of course, I've owned those. I used to buy tuners and just leave them on my work box with the lights on. Right?
Right.
Just for decoration.
Right.
In my dining room, I have a con that I just turn on. It's just part of the decor. It's a nightlight. I'm not going to use that fucking thing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I love this thing right here.
Right. Oh yeah, the Polytune. That's awesome.
And
I have one somewhere here on my desk.
I love the Polytune pedal.
Yeah.
I started using it because it was in the workbox that Joe had. And then I got used to it. And I love the 6-string quick look.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
And
I love that too. That one works great.
And this is great. And the only thing I don't like is seeing this on a guitar.
Yeah, on the neck. Yeah.
During a show.
Sure, yeah.
And you know, like, I get you got to tune on the fly and stuff, but you're not in such a hurry that you can't just grab it out of your, you know, and just stick it on. Sure. Or you could just have a tuner.
Right, on the floor.
Which is also a mute.
Right.
Like, okay, geez, and sometimes it's a buffer.
Right.
Which some people need or don't, and, you know.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting the theories of, tuning, and Eddie did this and Eddie did that. And I think probably a lot of people spend too much time looking at that.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's great to have a hobby.
But like you said though, from if you're thinking about Eddie's state of mind at that point in his life, where he's at in his head, he's not and the guitar, like you mentioned, it's such a pain in the ass at the time, and he talks about that all through his interviews.
Well, yeah, and like I've got a Jackson here.
Yeah.
It's got a regular trim.
Yeah.
It's a DiMarzio trim.
Okay.
So I have to do some of this
right.
when I'm using it.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly checking the B string.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I bend it on the D and check it. That's close enough. I think most people don't have great pitch.
Right. That's
so, when they're like, oh, you got to do this, it's because they read it and they have a visual machine that can tell them.
Right. When I built my replica back there, everybody was like, when you going to whammy bar that thing? I'm like, I ain't going to. Because I don't want to mess with it.
I have my friend, he made me this.
Oh yeah, awesome.
That's cool. And you know what those are?
Oh yeah, dog chain. Yeah.
Yep. From Fairfield Guitar Company.
Yeah, that's right, Lewis. Right. I got.
From Lewis.
Oh yeah, you gotta see this though. This is cool. See if you know what that is. Hold on.
Geez, I do not. Is that geez.
Hold on, I got it wrong, actually. Hold on. Let's see if I can get it.
Oops. I don't recognize it. I do recognize it, but I don't.
It's the Pick of Destiny.
Oh shit. Oh, so you got the strap too?
Yeah, I got the strap. Yeah, I got the. No, this is Lewis's thing. Yeah.
Yeah, he does great stuff.
Yeah, and then I made that one.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's got the Frankenstein humbucker in it, and Donnie Ward made me the neck, and it's.
Oh yeah, he makes great stuff, huh?
It's a beauty, man. It's a heavy. It's swamp ash, just like the real deal.
Yeah, this is heavy too.
Yeah.
And the guy who made it, he collects high-end vintage stuff.
Okay.
But he just shows up at a gig one day with this case, and he's like, "Oh, hey, I brought you something." And I was like, "Oh shit!" And he really went to town on it.
Right.
And it weighs a ton.
Right.
And just like Eddie's, like the neck is high.
Right. Shimmed up.
Yeah, like you can get your hand under there.
Right.
And it's very similar, and all it's really lacking is the rosewood dots,
Right. That's cool.
But it's fun. It's a fun guitar, and it's got the old school Floyd on it.
Right.
And then once Lewis started doing these straps,
right,
you need one for each color, and
right.
So I have this one, I have the original, the Bomber,
right,
and then I have the black and yellow.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to put eyelets in the Charvel.
Right.
But
right.
The hooks on the black and yellow strap, they're like a C hook.
Yeah. They can. Yeah.
They will clamp around a strap button.
Right.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. And
that's awesome, man.
God damn, that thing must weigh almost 10 pounds.
I know. That's what I was gonna say. That weighs like a Les Paul, like a heavy Les Paul. Yeah, I had a E2. Remember those?
Yes.
And the sucker weighed a ton.
Oh, that must have weighed like 11 and change.
Dude, so this guy comes to me and thinks it's my guitar, his guitar from when he sold it off, right? And he's like, "What?" I said, "I've had it for 30 years, man. I don't really want to sell it." And he goes, "Is there anything you'd take for it?" I said, "If you can find me a Carina Explorer, I'll swap you." And he went out and got me a black finish, Korean
Oh,
expert,
that's cool.
custom shop,
Oh,
83,
wicked.
83. Yeah. So
Wicked.
yeah,
How many guitars do you own?
around the same as you.
I have thinned it out a little, and I started. I made a reverb page and all that,
Right.
and I made a little Instagram. I just put the shit I sold on Instagram, not the stuff that's for sale.
Right.
It's just so there can be a link.
So you do. So talk about that. You buy and sell, right?
I've done it forever.
Okay.
Just not. I haven't been like on my eBay.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't like it's Mike. Hey, I'm Mike.
Right.
But I've done it 20 years on eBay.
Yeah.
And like everybody, I buy stuff I think I want.
Yeah.
And then of course, all those years of Guitar Safari, I haven't like, oh, if I buy all these, I can sell this, and then I can get to that,
Right.
And one thing I did great on Safari was brass. Because guess who wants brass at a guitar shop? Nobody.
Right.
Now watch, everybody wants it.
Right.
All of our 18 followers, right? And
be looking for, going to every store looking for the extra brass in the boxes.
well, I'd go in and I what would happen is on Guitar Safari, you split up.
Okay.
And there's probably a few minutes where they don't know it's Joe. He's just some dude with a baseball cap. But then somebody figures it out. If he plugs in, then they know. They're like, oh shit. And so he'll go look at the stuff that he can afford, stays in his budget, and and then I'm like, hey, do you guys gonna need any of that old brass junk from the 70s? And sometimes they'd be like, what, like this? And they pull like Schecter shit out on the card, still in the wrap.
Yeah.
And I mean, a couple places I went, I have a picture. I must have 25 brass pick guards and bridges, and and they'd be like, I'd be like, how much for everything? And they're like, everything? And and I'd be like, yeah, how much? I'll take it all. And they're like, 400? And I'd be like, and then I'll turn that into 1,200.
Sure.
And of course my friends would go, hey man, you don't happen to have? Yeah, I do. And I just give it away,
Right.
And and even now, like if when Joe's out on tour, he'll shoot me a picture like, do you want these? Because there's vintage brass and then there's modern brass.
Okay.
And like, so someone like him, he could see and say, oh, that's a brass trem.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I see it and go, that's not a Schecter or Stars guitars or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I see it's more modern or it's off a court.
Right.
But he's not looking for that. But he still sends me stuff randomly. When he's out there, he'll be like, dude, I just found this. You want it? And I'm like, yeah, I want it. And he knows I'm going to turn around and put it on eBay,
Eric Gales is this guy, when he first came out in the early, when I first saw him in the early 90s, man, what a player. And I mean, of course now we've seen all these jams with Joe and that guy's, and I think Joe loves him too, right?
He's fantastic. And it's funny because, if I tune his guitar, last time I was out on tour and he sat in, well, I just tune it because it's normal to me because he's upside down.
Okay.
But he's mad crazy on the guitar.
Dude. Yeah.
And I always get, I can say this now that I don't work there. Like on the cruises and stuff, they have a big jam.
Yeah.
So these people are coming to sit in on a rented amp, but they show up with a pedal board.
Right.
To play Going Down.
Right.
You really need that?
Right.
Eric Gales, because his overdrive generated from he was like the one exception where I was always like, "That's no problem, bro. I got you. I got you covered. You can use your pedal board." You know, other people I'd be like, "Do you really need that?
Right.
You know,
Right.
is that necessary? You know, to bust my balls when I'm trying to take care of 5 dudes at once. You know, and
Right.
a lot of players though just plug into whatever,
Right. Right.
and they just play because they know they're going to be done in 7 minutes. You know,
Right. Right. No,
and
nobody will remember because they're all drunk.
yeah, I mean, by the time the group jam shows up, most of the people on the boat are lit.
Right.
You know, and I mean, it's a great environment that bands do that though.
Yeah.
Like these cruises, because first of all, you can approach your idols. Second of all, you can see jams you've never seen, people playing together you would never experience. I don't know what a metal cruise is like because I find metal bands aren't jammy.
Right.
You know,
Right.
everything's specific, but you know, in terms of like the blues rock progressive cruises, you know, that's a great catalyst for stuff to happen.
Sure.
You know, in my experience, I went on like 5 or 6 of those cruises. It's just the worst thing for me because I got to go everywhere the artist goes for every jam. And then also I'm set up where people can get to me. So then you've got the drunk dude in his flip-flops and it's like, "Hey dude, can I have that guitar?" And you know, I want to just go, "Really? Do you have something better to fucking say to me?" But I have to be nice, right?
Right.
But see, now that I'm unemployable, I can say anything I want. and you know, some of the fans get a little too comfortable.
Yeah.
Because they see you, so they think they're your pal.
Right. Right.
Or they come on every cruise. So then, you know, they expect like you're going to remember them. And, you know, my general thing was as soon as I got that vault locked up and rolled away, I'm on the elevator up to the floor that you can't come to.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And minding my own business. And plus my wife would be there.
Right.
And she'd be dragging me around too.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so, you know, there was always an agenda, you know?
Yeah.
But it is a cool environment though for bands to get together and jam.
Right.
And it somewhat launches careers, you know, like people who have been on the boat when I were there, Jared James Nichols, you know, when he was there the first time, he's playing in like the smallest stage with, you know, at a time when maybe a lot of people won't show up, but his perseverance and his creativity and his general vibe is what helped him rise up, and his dedication to working hard, you know, and he's a swell guy as well. And, you know, you see people like King Solomon Hicks or Chris Stone, right? Like these people, Larkin Poe,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I mean,
they're good.
Those girls, the first time we heard them, they were just like I guess, you know, a startup, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're arguably super successful now, you know?
Yeah. They're awesome.
And they're fantastic players.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, she brought a pedal board too. I let her slide because she had a Heaven and Hell shirt on, which I think it was Tyler Bryant's shirt, not hers. I don't know.
Right. Because she's one of them was married. One of them was married to Tyler Bryant, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because get to come through town before. Tyler's been here a couple of times, and Larkin Poe's been here, I think, once. But yeah, I caught them on the internet the first time, and I was like, man, these girls. I think it was during the pandemic that I saw them doing their thing, and
yeah, and that girl can play slide. Like what?
It's crazy.
I can't play slide. I'm terrible.
Yeah, me either. I never tried to learn.
Yeah, well, and I always knew people who did it.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? Just 1 second, I got to grab my dog. All right, come here. Get down off of there. You are a dummy. You're a dummy. You can't do that. He's climbing up on the back of a chair like he's going to launch off, fall off. We don't want any injuries.
Right.
You know?
No extra.
Good boy. Yeah, he's starting to really enjoy the Van Halen live videos on YouTube.
Oh, good. Good.
He's last night I was watching Montreal '84. It's kind of blurry.
Yeah. That one.
And Roth's in all this sparkly shit. And he's fixated on him and was just barking. Like, that he's bad news. Now, did you ever see Roth when he had his band?
Which time?
Eat 'em and Smile?
I saw that tour, yeah. Huh?
Yeah, I did too. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I did see that tour. I saw him with Van Halen 07, 08, and then 12, 15. Of course, I saw him in 84 too.
Wicked.
Yeah, so I saw him in the first part of the 84 tour in January. So like,
I mean, you know, the funny thing is he's a showman, entertainer, who happens to sing.
Right.
This is my opinion. So when people go, well, Sammy's a better singer, that's not what it's about.
Sure. Right.
Like, and I always love that Ross, like, you know, he's like, yeah. Those aren't the words. Who cares? Look at him. It's Roth, you know?
Right.
And
bigger than life. I mean, I saw him on Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Oh, wicked.
So the first time I ever saw David Lee Roth or Van Halen was when he was being interviewed by Jim Ladd. And I just flipped the channel, you know, like 3 channels. Boom, there he is. And I'm thinking, that's the thing that caught me, is this guy in riding pants that's, you know, just crazy, right?
Well, and also if you're not from California,
yeah,
and then you see these guys wearing these clothes, and you're like, where do I get these clothes? Where do I get these shoes? Right. You know, like they all wore those Capezio dance shoes.
Yeah.
You know, and where do you get this? And then in high school, little later, you know, like before I was allowed to grow my hair, I realized that my girlfriend had these stripy shirts.
Yeah.
And then I realized those were girls' shirts. Yeah, they were wearing. You know.
Yeah.
And obviously, there was some stylist stuff going on with the pants.
Yeah, there's a girl she's on Instagram with me, and she was their stylist at that point.
Is that the Australian lady?
I think so. She's done everybody's stylist stuff, but I forget her name. But
Floor? Yeah,
that's her.
Yeah.
I reached out to her to try to be on because I wanted to get all the skinny on all the clothes from all back in those days, because, you know, one, I want them to be put out in a museum or something so we can see those crazy jump pants or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I wonder
where all that is.
Yeah, where is all that? I mean, you know, have you tried to get Wolfgang in?
I have tried. Yeah, I've tried twice. I'm going to try again.
Yeah, I would keep trying, because I got to think he's a nice enough guy. He seems like a pretty well-rounded guy.
I've met him, and he was really cool.
Super. I mean, he is a Hollywood kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, it's not like he went and bagged groceries or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, or dug, you know, mowed lawns or whatever. But he seems like he's figured a way to handle all that without turning into some pompous dick.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And he seems very respectful of the legacy. And I love that he's like, I'm not going to go play Van Halen.
Right.
I'm going to write my own shit. And, you know, of course, if he sits in with someone like Grohl and they play Van Halen, that's one thing.
Right.
But like, he's not using his name.
Yeah.
To get where, I mean, it helps.
Sure.
You know, it's certainly.
Like you said, if he didn't have anything to back it up, it would be nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, we also, you know, we can't negate that if he wasn't named Van Halen, would we be listening to him?
Right.
I mean, I didn't buy his records, but they are not they're not offensive. What I've heard, to me, they sound good.
Yeah, they're good. They're modern rock. It's good.
And it seems like he's getting a lot of good shows,
and
he's going out and putting the miles in.
You're definitely doing that. Been
you
on the
know?
road nonstop for 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
Like his dad.
And, he's staying at the helm of EVH.
Uh-huh.
My drummer buddy just got one of those hollow body things and left it here for me to mess with. Those are really nice guitars right out of the box.
Yeah, I haven't played one yet.
I mean, I have a 335 that I love. And so when I pick that up, to me, the 335 just smokes this because that's me being older.
Right.
So when I pick up a 335, I think Larry Carlton, or Dave Edmunds or something,
Sure.
And you look at my little, Robin Ford fantasy or something.
Yeah, those got those Tim Shaw pickups there. They're Tim Shaw designed in the new Wolfgang guitar, which was kind of an interesting, add-on to that.
And the neck pickup's backwards.
Is it?
Yeah, the pole pieces are backwards, just like the Peavies were backwards.
Okay.
Well, at least my Wolfgang Special, my Peavy is backwards. Best thing I ever did was walk in that pawn shop in Kentucky and buy that thing.
Wolfgang.
Yeah, I paid $1,000, and
what color is it? Which one did you get?
Purple.
Oh, I got it. That's mine.
Oh shit!
How about that?
Yeah, except mine's the Special.
Well, that's what it is.
Well, it's flat.
Oh, it's a flat top. I got you.
Yeah.
You're talking about the PV. Yeah, that's the EVH one. That's the Pender.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I know.
Yeah, the PV's great, and it's the irony was the dude came to my show that night.
Yeah.
And I didn't put him on the list or anything because I was negotiating in the pawn shop for the guitar.
Right.
And I was trying to get for 800.
Right.
But he shows up wearing a Van Halen hat, and I was like, oh shit, there he is, and he was thrilled because I'm using the guitar right away. And it's a solid guitar. It stays in tune great, even though it's got like the shitty Ping Floyd.
Yeah.
They're not shitty. I mean,
I've got a first year quilt to the PVs, which was like for a while there, he only got a certain amount of wood that was good. And then they went over to kind of to flame top type. And, but that one, the first year one I have, it's like a PRS. It's that great.
They're really perfectly made.
Yeah. Very good.
And I have one Ernie Ball, but it's the EX.
Okay.
So it's right after.
Right after.
But it's super flamey, crazy, it's quilted, but it's a lot of figure. And I actually just loaned that to a buddy of mine. He's doing a comparison to a Wolf PV, Wolfgang, I don't know. So I guess he's doing a video where he's going to show how the evolution,
Yeah.
And I just had some spare money, like anybody ever says that, but
right.
But last year I came into some money, and so I just bought a few guitars that I wanted a 335, so I just went and got one, and I wanted the Ernie Ball, so I went and got it, and I just picked up a few things, Black Les Paul Custom, just some things I never got around to getting.
Right.
And
I'm there with you. Black Les Paul Custom. I missed one for $500 in '83 and got the Roadstar. Mom and Dad got me the Roadstar and an amp, which is fine.
I mean, I have my grandmother to thank for a lot of the initial purchases.
Right.
She went out of her way, working a factory job to make sure there was a Marshall and a custom Charvel.
That's a grandma for you right there, man.
Yeah.
Grandma.
That's the power of being a child of divorce, right?
Right.
And an only child. That's the good part of it,
Right.
It makes up for the bad parenting,
Oh man, I appreciate you coming on today, man. I've heard a lot about you through my buddies Lewis and through Mikey, and
awesome.
And of course, I followed you for years, and your passion for Van Halen, is obvious. So I appreciate you.
I hope the people who watch your show will be interested in some of the bullshit we're talking about.
Right, the gear nerdery that we just went on.
Yeah, it's always fun. I mean, and obviously we could do this for days and days and days. There's so many topics, so many,
right.
And a lot of those guys, the cool thing about, I guess, to close out my statement, is the cool thing about Eddie and Van Halen, just like any band or guitar person, it connects people.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So I'm connected to you now. It's like, and we all, like, we're never all in the same room,
right?
But we all know each other, and we could, like, if you need a favor, I can help. Then now you have a friend in this area who, or you say, oh geez, if I could only find this pedal, and I go, well, I got one right here. It's in the mail. You know what I mean?
Sure,
so, man. And of course, like Lewis is he's a real catalyst for pulling people together.
Yeah, he is.
With the strap thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, he asked me quite a while ago, he's like, do you want to design your own strap? And I'm like, I said, you're going to sell like 3.
Right. Right.
And I usually sit down when I play.
Right.
But he's super kind. And, I try to help him. Like, he'll send me, like, I'm thinking about buying this. I'm like, don't waste your money.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun, and it's cool to talk to Van Halen people who, like, just talking to you about the tuning thing.
Right.
There's another guy, Alan
Garber.
Yeah, Alan Garber.
Yeah.
So he's got it down to the science of it.
Sure. Yeah.
But you and I are more layman. Like, well, I don't know. Maybe Eddie was just like maybe he just tuned it that way because he clamped the Floyd the wrong way.
Yeah, right. I just instinctually was doing everything it seemed like he did like in an instinctual kind of like, let's just try it way. I mean, he didn't even, there wasn't a lot of thought.
And then there's guys, and it's cool that Alan figured that out. And then there's another guy, I don't know his name, but he has all the rigs and he demonstrates them.
The Van Halen.
You've seen him. I know you have. Sure. He's got like an orange plexi that he built, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Jim Gosstead. He's been on here.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, Jim was on here early on. Yeah, Jim was on, and we talked all that. And there's a guy, Martin Smith, who is a buddy of mine I just met out of England, who is doing some of these videos. We were talking about the Fender into the preamping into the Marshall, and he was kind of showing what that sounds like, and how maybe that was the secret sauce of Van Halen. We're not sure, but we did have somebody come forward who was doing the work on the amps back at that period, who says so, but I have yet to have him on to say this on camera yet. But
well, it'll be a good episode when it shows up.
Right awesome. On. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much. I hope you can cut this up so you got usable shit. And
it's all good stuff, man. Thank you for coming on, Mike.
Yeah, and definitely stay in touch, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Anytime, man.
All right, thank you so much.
See you, buddy. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you. Woo! Bye. See you, buddy.
Bye.
Thank you.